All right, so a few technical challenges and then we're gonna be ready to go. Where's our clock? Big crowd from O'Leary Burke tonight, I see.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah. And
All right.
I can do the.
Well, let me call us to order first, and then you can do that. Welcome to the May 18th, 2023 Essex Junction Development Review Board meeting. 6:31, we'll call it to order. Chris, go ahead and read our hybrid statement, please.
The meeting of the Essex Junction Development Review Board has come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting held at both 2 Lincoln Streets and on Zoom. Because there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's rights to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by using the chat feature on Zoom or by emailing cyuen@essexjunction.org. And in the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting, if necessary, to June 15th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. at 2 Lincoln Street, Essex Junction. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance to the law. As required by the open meeting law, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance of all members participating in the meeting and have those members attending remotely identify themselves to ensure that they can hear and be heard throughout the meeting.
So are we starting in the room or we start online?
Well, let's start online because there are not that many. I see 3 participants who have joined us online. We have Erica. Will you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Say that you're here. Okay, well, if we don't hear from Erica, it's Christine. Will you please unmute yourself and say that you're here?
Hey, this is Christine Cosmeter. I am here.
And Alexis?
Yes, I am Alexis Zucker and I'm here.
Okay.
Awesome.
And let's try Erica again. Erica, are you there?
Not so much.
All right. That's it online.
All right, good. So the rest of us are physically here, so we're all good. All right, any disclosures or conflicts of interest to disclose tonight, board members? Okay. Any additions or changes to the agenda? Chris? Any changes to the agenda?
I don't have any.
We've got a few pieces of paper here that you distributed, so we know.
Oh, they're
those are-
related.
All right, so we're looking at public to be heard. Anybody in the audience that wants to say something about an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Now's your chance. Yes, sir. State your name and, yeah. Come on up, sure.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I know you have a full agenda as it is, so I'll be as brief as possible. My name is Jason Struthers. I am the founder and operator of Trichome, Vermont, which is the city's first cannabis commercial operation. The main reason I'm here tonight is to inform you that come July 29th, my license is up for renewal. Despite a number of communications with the city council, I do expect that there will be some pushback and that they will deny my license renewal should that. I don't foresee any problems in getting approval from the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. However, from the city council and the local cannabis control commission is another story. So it is my hope that the city will have learned its lesson with Passion Fruit Farms. But should they deny my license, I will be asking for your help in the same regard to intervene.
We'll wait till that happens, but we'll apply the rules as we see them when the case comes and
Sure. Yeah,
I
just to
think-
clarify, Act 164 is the legislation that allows me to cultivate with a license from the Vermont Cannabis Control Board, and Act 158 is the legislation that protects me as a Tier 1 outdoor operation that is exempt from local permitting. With that said, I also just got approval from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets to operate as a farm. And so came here today to see if you guys had any questions about that and any concerns.
When do you trigger the next tier? Is it when do you become like a commercial operation?
I am a commercial
You are,
operation. I was going to apply for a Tier 2 this year. However, if I go up into a tier, then that Act 158 no longer protects me.
Okay.
Zoning. And in that case, I find it highly unlikely that the local Cannabis Control Commission would approve a permit.
We will act on our own rules as we see them. If the state has something going on, they can do their own thing. I think we act separately, although we have to follow their rules. So.
Okay, I'm confused. Can you reiterate that, please?
Well, if there's an act that protects you, then we have to follow that. In other words, when the state says you can't deny this for these reasons, that affects the way we judge. But we also have our own rules in the municipality. The other item that you mentioned, we didn't see it the way the administrator saw it. And a lot of it comes down to what's acceptable, what's normal, and frankly, since it's legal everywhere, we consider it normal now. So that was kind of the gist of what happened there. But every case deserves to have its own set of facts ruled on, and we'll wait for you to come in.
Sure. I just wanted to make you guys aware of it, seeing as you guys only meet once a month, and my application process is due. And I wanted to see if you had any questions or concerns.
Without knowing where it is and what's really going on, I don't have any questions at this time.
Well, it's in the city. Other than that, I don't want to disclose a exact location for security reasons, but it's in the city.
Well, we're glad you're coming in. We're happy to talk about it whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Question? Okay. All right. Public meeting on a request to change the roof material at 10 Pearl Street from slate to shingle. It's in the Village Center District. The Historic Preservation Review criteria apply. Anybody here in the audience for that? And when you come up, we're gonna swear you into so you can speak after me. Repeat, I hereby swear that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Great. And
Do we have to approve the minutes from the April
yeah,
20 meeting?
we'll go back. Thanks. And state your name and then you're ready to speak.
My name is Alexis Anderson. I'm here on behalf of Lakepoint Property Management. That's the acting owner for Linden Street property. They own 1012 Pearl, pretty much right across the street. I am here to ask to replace the slate roof to use shingle versus slate. And the owners have used a vendor that had reached out and were told they don't need permits, but then we pushed a little bit harder and realized we needed to come in front of all of you and discuss it further. So thanks for squeezing me into this meeting. The slate roof has surpassed its lifespan. It's failing. The building is hard to currently rent due to the failure of the roof. We've tried patching it. It's just done. It's had its life. It's ready to move on. The cost of putting slate on compared to shingle is just astronomical. It then impacts us being able to fix other things. The building needs painting. It needs some other love. And we want to be able to spread the love across the entire building and hold its structure. The other buildings that surround 1012 Pearl currently do not have shingles. They have asphalt shingles, not slate. So we're just coming to the board to ask if it's possible to use asphalt instead of slate.
All right, so we got a lot of material in the package. Does anybody have questions about it? The applicant has, in my opinion, done their homework. They've gone through the state system to find out that they are in fact eligible if not listed, which is one thing. And then it's really a money trail. So if there's federal or state money involved, they may have to satisfy the federal requirements. In this case, they don't. I understand they don't. So it's really up to the municipal authority. We have interesting rules here. We may require them to do it, but we don't have to. And I would agree with everything that has been said by the applicant already. The actual section of the text in our rules, deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature. The new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, material. I would say this falls under that criteria. The material in question is slate. It is astronomically expensive to replace if it's beyond its lifespan, which can be long, but it does get to a point where they get all soggy and punky and, it's bad. So I don't have a problem with this application. The criteria besides material indicate color, texture, visual appearance, that kind of thing. So I would, I don't have a problem with it. What I would request is that you work with a qualified slate roofer to salvage the material that's up there so they can use it, because they will pick out the ones that are still fine and they'll reuse them somewhere.
Great.
And so the historic resource can possibly continue, even if it's not continuing on that building. Anyone else on the board?
No.
Did you, just out of curiosity, get a quote for the slate roof and you could,
We didn't get a quote specifically for this roof. So from the beginning, we've been using Champlain Roofing, Ryan Horton. He's been contracted, permitting was in his contract on his end. And we were getting ready to start. And I said, something doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel quite right. And so that's when we got a hold of your office and said, hey, we were ready to start, but something, we just wanted to make sure we were following the rules. We want to make sure that we're not impacting the community in a way that we don't want to. And so we do have and manage other buildings that are within Essex and the neighboring counties that have the exact same amount of roof, and those roofs were between 100,000 and 125,000 between hauling the slate off and then hauling the slate back on and making sure we can match everything correctly. And that's a comparable bid that we've received in the last year.
Anyone else on the board?
The lower roof is that asphalt shingle.
And there's some membrane up there or some other?
Yeah, so there's a membrane on the top, and we've fixed that as many times as we can. That will be rubber membrane as well, but that all of it together is failing at the current moment. And the building is at 50% capacity because we've got offices that just can't any longer be patched, and we're worried about the inside and structural parts of the building.
So you'll be changing everything, including the roof on the porch.
No, the room, the porch will stay as is.
So will you match it, or will you try?
We were trying to stay as close to the color of the slate versus that porch color.
Yeah, there should be some, it's pretty light, but there should be some materials, some asphalt shingles that are pretty close.
There's a proposed color here
Yeah.
that looks,
Yeah, just put it.
I saw the thing, I didn't see the circle
the one
or.
with the heart on it.
That kind of goes part of it.
Good. Got it?
It's on there, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot more red in there. It's almost closer to the driftwood color, but you might want to get a couple of actual, they have them on racks, so you can
Yeah,
really look
they
at them.
did, yes. And when we brought them on site, that was the one that matched the closest in terms of, also keeping in mind that the slate up there is incredibly warm with sun.
All right. Awesome. So do we need a motion on this?
Yeah, I've got recommended motions set back to the memo.
All right. All right, one of you wizards want to read the motion? Anybody? Ready?
So, and we all agree. I move that the Development Review Board approve the proposed change in roofing material at 10 Pearl Street in accordance with the Historic Preservation Review criteria outlined in the Land Development Code.
And the friendly amendment to have them salvage as much of the existing slate as the,
And to salvage as much of the slate as you can to be recycled for other purposes.
all right. Any further, I need a second.
Oh, second?
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time. Have a great night.
We look forward to a dry building.
Me too.
Mhm.
More important. All right, let's see, let's go back and do our meeting minutes from April 20th. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes from April 20th, 2023.
Anybody want to second that? Okay, any discussion?
Quick point of clarification, I was not present for that meeting.
You're
Should I
still-
abstain?
You don't have to, apparently not. There is a typo, at least one on the first page. Brad Rubman has a few extra Ds on his name there. That's all I had. All right, any other corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, now we're back to, we're up to public hearings. And we have 3 of them, so maybe I'll swear everybody in at the same time, assuming that you're all here. I'm gonna read this and you all need to, raise your right hand and say I do. I hereby swear that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. Thank you all very much. All right, up first, final site plan to remove an existing duplex and construct 18 residential units with parking at 161 Pearl Street in the HA district by 161 Cheeseman LLC. Probably over there, I think is the target seat. And introduce yourself and then make a statement about the project. We've seen it before. We did have this come in. This is a final.
Yes. My name is Brian Courier, O'Leary Burke Civil Associates, representing 161 Cheeseman LLC. As John previously mentioned, we're into you folks towards the end of 2022 with a concept plan for this application. It was in quite a bit more detail than you typically see in a concept plan. We had full staff report done, engineering review comments, and it was essentially a preliminary application. And we got a lot of good feedback from the board, and we tried to implement that, and we're here tonight looking for final site plan review. So the application is a 18-unit multi-family structure located on a 0.32 acre lot at 161 Pearl Street. The parking, we're proposing 5 new parking spaces in front of the existing duplex on the parcel. the 4-story building. We'll have 4 stories facing Pearl Street, 5 toward the back. We had a lengthy discussion last time about what constitutes a 4-story and 5-story building according to the city of Essex Junction. That has not changed, and we're still proposing a 4-story building. The reason we can fit, or proposing 18 units on a 0.32 acre lot is the lot at 159 Pearl Street is co-owned by the applicant, and we're looking for a shared parking agreement from the Development Review Board. Some of the things that we've implemented since last time we were here was the front parking lot has been reworked according to the city engineer comments. We've added a pedestrian bench. We've extended the sidewalk on the rear of the building. One of the comments was to provide an isolated pedestrian area in the exterior of the building, and we've done that. Another thing is we've proposed a gravel path in between the proposed structure and the existing structure. One of the comments we had was, if anybody does exit the back of the building, we don't want them to have to walk all the way around both properties to get to Pearl Street. So we're showing a gravel path in between the buildings with a stairwell where we break grade from the first story down to the ground. Another thing that was mentioned was adding lights within the area that's being used for the shared parking. Obviously, with the rear entrance, we're sharing the parking spaces in the back of the 159 property. And we've added 2 light poles, LED fixtures, and proposed LED fixtures for the existing poles in order to bring the rear parking lot lights up to current village standards. Those are mostly the big changes that have been implemented as far as the site plan is concerned. And not sure how you want to go through the staff report, John, or.
I think we should, let's just keep it to the items that Chris had comments on, if they're bold. If we need a variance or anything, we should be keeping track of that. So I'll have you go through that, and we can comment when we need to. I can say I don't really have too many issues with you know, what was going on. The height situation seems to be, and the story count is fine. I did, in my version of this, strike the word marginally from the staff notes.
I saw that too.
In that, we've all played this game before. You either are or you're not in compliance, and in my opinion, you're in compliance. Even if it's just by a hair, you're still there, and that's the way it goes. I find that that the building's 4 stories, and especially since it presents that way from the street, I think that's perfectly fine. So,
And it's 4 stories or 58 feet in height, whatever's less. So we meet both of those criteria.
good. Did everybody catch why it's why it's only 4 stories? Okay, good. All right, so moving through that, then what's the first one is the parking, and you're asking for a waiver. So can we just make sure that we're all fine with that? Anybody have a question? We went through this before,
Yeah, we
right?
did.
So the parking's on the other side.
So is it a waiver because you're sharing the spaces with the other building that you?
I think that, I don't know if that's necessarily a waiver, but we need the DRB to allow us to use a shared off-site parking agreement with an adjacent property. But the waiver, I believe, is for, the village requires the city requires 2 parking spaces per unit plus 1 for an additional 10 units, I believe. What we're asking for is to have 18 shared parking spaces with a legal agreement with the southern same property owner to the south. And we're also proposing 5 new spaces in the front. So with 18 shared spaces, we're asking for a parking waiver just above a 1-to-1 ratio. The 18 units proposed, as mentioned previously, are all 1-bedroom units. And we did provide a parking table for all the current tenants within the commercial building. And their requirement is 54 parking spaces strictly out of the parking table in the city land development regulation.
And did we ask if you were using the shared parking overlay from, I forget who that's a regional or federal or state?
No, so we didn't propose any shared parking.
You're not proposing?
As you know, residential and commercial typically mix well. If we did do a shared parking analysis, we do believe we'd come up with even more parking availability. We chose not to do that, as there's 84 spaces available, 54 are allocated to the commercial use, 18 are for residential. There's still 12 extra spaces for,
So you need a waiver for the count, but and then somewhere in the paperwork, there's a shared parking agreement that doesn't expire. And after that, we're all set.
yep, that'll be a approval condition, staff added.
Any questions?
Who parks in the front, the 5, like, does anyone park there, or those 5 new places in front of the building?
There's an existing parking lot in the front now, so it's just being reworked.
And it doesn't connect, this doesn't connect to the,
It does. The parking lot in front of our building will connect to the one
The one.
property.
Probably wants to have at least 1 or 2 of them tagged for visitors or
yeah.
deliveries or something.
Yeah, there's an entrance in the front, there's an entrance in the back. There is a common hallway that does connect them both. So it'd be at a first come, first served basis. in the front.
When
People
Domino's
moving-
shows up, where do they go?
What's that?
When Domino's shows up,
That's right.
where are they going?
Deliveries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other, yeah?
Are you envisioning parking spaces being assigned to the unit, or is it kind of a free-for-all?
I don't think we'll need to. I think there's plenty of parking, as a shared parking analysis would likely show that the back lot is basically empty at night when you'd expect the building to be fully occupied. So we don't expect much competition for the spaces in the back of the building.
And the front of the building is disallowed from tenant parking?
It depends how the legal agreement is drawn up and approved by the city attorney. I would imagine that the rear property or the parking lot in the rear is what would be shared primarily.
You're talking about in front of the retail space?
That's,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's commercial space in the front, and there's also commercial space in the rear of the building. The ones in the front are mostly the restaurant, more visible businesses. The ones in the back, you wouldn't know they were there unless you drove back there. Much less parking need.
Yeah.
I have, this is probably a question for Chris. Do we, as the city, are we going to be requiring parking for electric cars as part of a?
It is not, electric cars are not in the LDC right now, but it is probably something that we will be
Yeah.
considering pretty soon in the future.
Yeah.
Some large developers have voluntarily
Yeah.
put those in, but it's not a requirement.
as a follow-up to that, you're not envisioning any charging stations?
No.
Anything else on parking?
We should probably add that to the, I would think that having that for, that's gonna be, something that people will look for when they're looking to rent something.
That's something that you can recommend to the planning commission.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Next item I have is under 7. It's a waiver request to allow a portion of one parking space to be located in the setback, which in my opinion is more of a technical issue since both properties are under the same ownership.
The maximum encroachment is 4 feet.
I don't have a problem.
It's the most southeastern.
Yeah, no, I think under the spirit of shared parking and the joint arrangement, I think that's not causing me any trouble. Anyone else? The next item was 10, pedestrian access, and I had to dig into this one to really figure it out. Chris has put a nice map on it, and I am a little concerned about this, and I'd like to get some more opinions. The front door is not accessible, and that I'm not sure I can deal with that. And I'm not sure well, I don't want to get into whether it's legal or not, but it's one of the life safety exits it's also the street door for anybody coming off the street. And it appears to be up several steps, a number of steps, but it's not accessible. And Chris noted that in the staff report that, you know, if you're happening to be along the sidewalk or you're something, that you can't get in the building, you have to go around back, which means you have to go all the way around the other building because you can't go down the stairs along the side. So I kind of have a tough time with that because it feels like you need to be able to get in the front door.
So I also noted that if you're not looking at wheelchair accessibility, there's still the issue that you would have to squeeze between two cars to get to the front entrance.
Gotcha.
You're saying with like a stretcher or emergency services or anything like that?
Or if you're just carrying large bags.
Yeah, you get one of those. You get the last one of the 5 spaces, and you got a bunch of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
It just seems, I can see a little striped area on the corner of the other building, but you know, it looks like there would be a way to do it, but I'm sort of fundamentally struggling with an inaccessible front door. And I think I couldn't quite tell that the architectural elevation suggests that it's at grade, but I don't think it is.
No,
The-
it's a few feet above.
A few feet above.
It's a few feet above. And you're right, ADA access is in the back. We're proposing an elevator.
And the parking and the elevator and all that are in the back. So functionally, the building works as long as the people that need that accessibility know and go back there.
And as long as you're driving
See, we're
cars.
not
Yeah.
showing an ADA space in the front.
So I'm struggling with that. I'm not. My understanding of the building code suggests that it needs to be accessible, but they kind of stop at letting you get out the door and stand there on the landing and kind of, you know, call for help. So it looks like you might comply with that, but you know, those steps are kind of. It's not in the spirit of an accessible entry, and I'm struggling with that. So. Maybe anyone else on the board have a comment about that?
Is there a possibility that you can do something to make that more accessible in the front?
Yeah, I think what we could look into is doing potentially an ADA ramp, you know, an 8% handrails. I mean, it's not a big grade difference. The current drainage does go down in that area, so we're trying to maintain the existing drainage way. You'll see the catch basins located on that side, so we're trying to get away from tipping the parking lot up and putting our runoff towards Pearl Street. That's why it's lower.
So yeah, I see the catch basin. Since you kind of have control over both lots, I'm suggesting that there's a way to park next to the striped off area already and ramp yourself up there. Maybe without, I don't know if you can do it without railing. It's only a couple of feet, but that's 24 feet at 1 and 12 meters. You're probably there, but
Yeah, we might be able to make the sidewalk work too.
you know, like I don't think you have to solve it from your own 5 front spaces because you'd end up losing one.
Yeah, and we are overparked. Obviously, we'd like to keep as many spaces as possible, but if the DRB feels that an accessible front door is, you know, something that's important, then we can definitely take it on as an approval.
That's my feeling. I'm only one person, but that's my feeling, and I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm just going to say that, you know, it needs to be accessible.
I mean, I feel strongly about that too.
Okay.
That's do I.
But other than that, you know, I think the building works great. I like the rest of the improvements that were done. That was
Yeah.
thanks for pointing it out too, Chris, because I didn't really catch that on the first round. All right, updated lighting plan is being requested. Appropriate illumination along the sidewalk. That's the one up and down the side of the building. Is that not on the lighting plan?
We're
So
talking
we-
about this part. Right here. Go.
That sidewalk, okay. Yeah.
So we started with bollard lighting there. We had 2 bollard lights. I think there was a little miscommunication between our office and the city engineer. We thought the bollard lights were the issue. I think it was that the city engineer didn't feel they were downcast enough to meet village standards. So we're amendable to putting the bollard lights back on and selecting a fixture that is purposefully and intentionally downcast. So
Is there a reason why we wouldn't use a wall pack or something on the building there? Is it
we could explore with a building mounted light too. We started with bollard
sort of
lights.
like the
but-
back corner? There are some neighbors behind you, but they're across the
Yep.
ravine, so.
And we are grading down a few feet too, so there's a natural berm there, or will be.
All right, so since that's your functional main door, I think that's probably important to get
Okay.
some lighting on.
Yep.
All right,
Is the gravel path lit?
Gravel path is not lit.
is the gravel path maintained in the wintertime?
I would imagine it would be.
Shouldn't the grab path be lighted?
It's right in between a fairly narrow corridor between the two buildings. I think there will be plenty of lights on in the residential use. I mean, there is a front exit of the building. There's a common hallway. You know, the gravel path is one option to get to the front, but it's definitely not the only option. At night, I would suspect someone would walk down the common hallway and go out the front door and use the gravel path.
We did have a path on on a recent application that was unlit, right? And it was more of a convenience or a sort of a circulating exercise path more than all right, I guess I'm not overly concerned about that.
So there are stairs to the right of the building there.
Yep.
And so those won't be lit.
No. Not intentional.
You know,
I mean,
if you were gonna do something, you might light the stairs off the building and then let that light just kind of spill off. Then the most dangerous part of it, which is the stairs, are illuminated, and the gravel, which is relatively flat, wouldn't be. It might be a compromise. Anyone else?
I agree.
yeah.
Like the steps.
That are inherently nasty. All right, so we're gonna get a lighting plan. It's gonna pick up the stairs and it's gonna pick up the back walk, and otherwise we're okay with it. There is a curb cut that looks like they need us to grant an exception. Anybody have an issue with that?
No.
Okay. Screening and buffering. Again, this kind of falls under the, usually you're trying to screen a residential, a commercial building from bothering its residential neighbors. In this case, you have a new residential building. The commercial building's probably not gonna care. I don't know if we decided last time we can't reverse engineer that
No.
buffering situation, right? So I don't have a problem with that.
I agree. No issue there.
Okay. Performance standards, I had underlined the circulation and the pedestrian things, but that's done now. The building, DRB should evaluate the proposed building relationship to the site and adjoining areas, building design, architecture, and finishes. I will say that I thought, I actually went back to read the section on that, and it said one of the things that they kind of look for is creativity, and I have to say that, you know, that's the back, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like almost anything else I've seen, except for a little bit like what the playfulness of the one that went in that on the Maple Street there. I think it's great myself. So I wasn't gonna challenge it, bother it. I'll say that we've had some issues before with the detailing of this particular architect's work and then having it not followed through on during construction. That doesn't get you any C of O, right? So if we're gonna show this kind of detailing, we're gonna want to see this kind of detailing, and I don't want to have people back here again saying, well, we didn't really build it that way. You know, that was, it's not about that architect, it's about the people executing the work. So I just don't want to have any mistaken agreements in place this time. We're seeing drawings. We want it to end up looking like that when we're hoping. That's all we're saying.
Understood.
Yeah, okay. And it's pretty interesting. So we don't really have purview over color, material, all that kind of stuff, but we do kind of have this overall sense that it's within the realm of reasonable for the.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone else?
No, I agree. I like the stark contrast between the different shapes of windows. Unique.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate it.
All right.
I'll mention one change to design that I've noticed from the earlier concepts was the balcony on the right side over here, which it now looks like it's enclosed space. Is that the intent?
That's correct. That's correct.
And that sort of takes us through anything that was bold. Does anybody have any other comments or questions on the application?
And I know that there was, with the planting, I know that there was a concern on the side, the neighbors on the other side. They were concerned with boundary and the trees that were there and retaining as many trees as possible.
Yep.
On the west side?
Yeah. I think that, I'm hoping that
And is that,
was taken into.
is that a residential?
No, so
No?
there's a restaurant there, and there was that was at the last
Oh, yeah.
year.
There's an existing cedar hedge, so you'll see it in the
Yeah.
the kind of wavy
Okay,
right there.
so that's what's already there.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then we're supplementing it with trees on that back
Okay,
as well.
so that, yeah, I think they were concerned about retaining that as much as possible.
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, any further discussion on the board then? Anyone in the audience? Yes, Nick?
Hi, I'm Nick Meyer from 28 Pleasant Street, and bear with me a minute because I've just started to see this, this project. A question regarding, is there any kind of outside amenities for the residents who are living there? Whether it be open space, picnic table, or something of that category.
We did ask him about that at the previous meeting, and I guess did we end up doing anything there? We thought you might have some opportunities.
So in the rear of the building, the sidewalk used to stop at the existing front door, the 6-foot walk in the back. We extended it to the other opposite side of the building, and we're proposing a park bench. We also talked about it being less than a quarter mile from Pearl Street Park, just down Pearl Street. So,
And in terms of the landscaping in front of the building, what are you proposing there? Parking spaces, right, and then between that and the sidewalk? Is there anything, TJ Boyle did your,
that is not correct.
oh, okay, then that's another.
We do have a landscape.
Yep, there's a landscaping plan. So as part of site plan review, there's a requirement for the amount of landscaping that has to be done. It's based on construction budget.
Yep.
So ours was done by a licensed landscape architect, Mike Lawrence. and we do meet the required landscape budget. You can see with all the shrubbery and trees proposed in front of the building, a lot of it's been proposed up front, or as much as will fit in the limited green space that's there.
So any large trees in Most of the shrubbery.
I think there's some decent sized trees
He's got some
that are in the front there, represented by the larger circles up front. Looks like there's 3.
Does the tree committee get review? Do they provide any review on this yet? Is it
That's,
supposed to be kind of
we don't,
recommendations or something?
they don't, we don't have that as a part of our process.
Not yet.
I think the present regulations that you just asked the tree committee. Look at
Yeah.
Yeah, so those larger crown trees are maple trees in the front.
Not sure. Yes.
Sienna Glen Freeman Maples, 3.5-inch caliper. It's a pretty nice tree. And then the other one's on. We have ivory silk lilacs out front, along the street, as the taller trees, and then they're underneath planted with more shrubs.
And the maple you said was what?
It's I'm not familiar with this one. Sienna Glen.
That's a
Freeman maple?
Would be a good choice for the salt conditions.
Yeah. What color do they get? It's not like your
me.
autumn blaze, right? We've seen a lot of those planted recently.
Orange or yellow.
All right. Well, I would say I thought the landscaping. I've worked with Mike before, and he's excellent. And I didn't have any real concerns or even changes to the landscaping plan. I guess if the tree committee studies this more carefully and finds they have any recommendations or comments, they should file them with Chris, and we'll.
Sure. Yeah, they're reviewable and available, and we'll
Yeah.
go through it.
We are trying to use them a little more, but I know it's not really in the regulations yet.
We could try to integrate that into our processes.
But we've been trying to figure that out for a number of years, so it's it's a lingering conversation. We haven't gotten the right answer yet. All right. Any other comments from the audience on this project? Hearing none. And board, you're all set? So we can close the public hearing. Do we need to have motions and all that to close public hearings?
I think
I
you're
can
supposed
just
to.
declare them closed.
I think you're supposed to.
All right, so I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Public hearing's closed. Thank you all. I think we're deliberating each one of these as they come. I would accept the motion made by staff and all of the items on it with the changes that we made regarding the accessible front entrance,
And
the
the
lighting,
steps. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And were there any others?
Lighting the steps and then the change of the lighting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Could we ask the tree committee to review or?
They're gonna do it anyway, but they have they can make recommendations. They can make them to staff. It ends up being a discussion with the applicant. You know, there may be a reason why the applicant would want to do something. You know, but I don't think we can enforce. You know what they say. It's just, we're all friends. All right. So there's a motion.
Motion to accept staff recommendations along with our proposed changes.
Yeah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nobody seconded my motion.
I thought we
Oh,
did.
sorry, I didn't hear you. You did it really quietly.
All right, motion carries. Unanimously, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Okay. Next up,
27.
final site plan to remove existing residential buildings and construct a new building with 34 studio apartments with parking at 227 to 229 Pearl Street. This is in the MFMU1 district. Applicant is 227 Pearl Street LLC. I believe that's Brent. And anyone else with, oh, okay. Yeah, good. Good. You don't like to send them up alone. All right, let's get to that one on the screen, and let's, I would love to hear just a little bit about the project. We have the project in front of us.
That's my file.
This is my,
I'll go this way.
all right.
What we're doing here is there are 3 existing residential buildings at 2729 Pearl Street. There is also an old lodge on that property too, so total 4 buildings. Our plan is to remove all 4 of those buildings and construct a single 34 unit apartment building. All 34 of those units will be studio apartments. And then at the same time, we're proposing parking, trash, stormwater, all the things that come along with a building and supporting that building. We were here for conceptual, I think almost 2 months ago now, when we discussed this with you. The plans even at that point were pretty far along. So kind of what we haven't changed all that much. Basically what we've done since then is refine the project, obviously give a lot more detail to the project, a lot more stormwater, infrastructure detail, just a lot of details in general. In the meantime, we also have gone for a thing called state permitting. We are waiting on our water and wastewater permit. We have a draft permit for Act 50 already in hand. That's just waiting on town approval and wastewater approval, and a few other portions of A&R. It's a pretty basic project. We feel it fits in with the existing environment, and I guess that's all I have to add, but we'd be happy to chat and discuss the project.
All right. Staff, do you want to walk us through the report and stop when you get to something sticky?
Sure, but I think that's some filing issues here.
Okay.
If you
I
walk
already
through
know.
how
I know what I love the project. I have only 2 concerns. One is I think we were talking about the drive aisle width. We're requested to squeeze them down to 22 feet, and I thought we were going to try and leave at least part of one, either the front one or the back one, or something that would accommodate a couple of extra trucks.
So yeah, if you look at the way the site is actually laid out, there are spaces straight.
So like if you
into the-
just go straight in, then you're right there.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, just because of the way the parking is laid out, I think it's either 3 or 4 of those spaces closest to the trash. Just because of the angle, there is actually more space in front of those.
Okay.
We are designating those truck spaces. We still feel that this sort of the parking itself will sort of bring in the type of tenant who wants to live there. So a tenant who looks at the parking width and parking amount and has a giant truck might decide that this is not the place for them. But we did decide to put in sort of driving straight in. Chris, if you kind of
go up a little bit near where the trash is. You can sort of see where those are.
Yeah, I mean, this would be completely contrary to anything that you actually see, that we will actually label parking spaces for large vehicles only.
I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Because I don't know if I've really ever, I've never really seen one of those signs, but
No,
we can get one made. There are a couple.
Compact cars when you
Yeah.
know they aren't gonna fit in, so why wouldn't you label them for trucks when you
So,
know?
so we'll be more than happy to label the few in the back for large vehicles only.
Okay. I
And
think
it looks
that-
like you've got EV charging.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
We are proposing to put in, at minimum, the conduit to have those ready to
Yeah.
be hooked up.
Green Mountain Power is actually offering, I believe they're offering,
Oh, that's
not necessarily incentives, but they're, basically obviously promoting anything electric. Obviously, GMP
Yeah.
is promoting.
Yeah, because that will.
That's great. You're out in front. I know there's a lot of debate over increasing the requirement, but they haven't quite gotten there yet. Some of it's a little scary around apartment complexes, but we'll take whatever is the minimum or whatever you're willing to give us. So that's great.
I have a question about that. So that in the discussions with GMP, is the conduit that you're contemplating running, would it accommodate more than 2 spaces?
So we're not, we are putting that in.
Yeah.
We're not contemplating it. I think at this time it would just be those 2. There's obviously a lot of parking spaces in close proximity to the building.
Mhm.
I think I think we could easily change that to add in the future. I'm thinking specifically probably those 8 in the back could easily be reconduited in the future to make more spaces for more EV stations in the back there, as well as looking even at the 12 up front. I just think the proximity to the building would make running additional conduit very simple.
Yeah.
That conduit's not required. The required depth on that's not very extreme, and the conduit size is not extreme. I think there'd be plenty of room to put more in.
I would recommend just discussing that with your electrical engineer because the changes to the service size can get out of hand pretty quick.
Well, this whole building is being proposed as electric.
Yeah.
So our service to the building is going to be pretty large, like to the tune of 12 to 1400 amps.
Yeah,
It's pretty big.
that's what I'm getting at. You're going to see that more and more because people don't really understand what happens to the infrastructure when you start saying, I want a lot of EV charging stations, because they draw a lot of power.
Are you, so you're using heat pumps versus gas?
So it's going to, so the only gas that's going to be used in these buildings will actually be for hot water right now, and that'll be basically 2, possibly 3 direct fired hot water heaters in the basement. But other than that, all the heat in the units, AC, everything will be the heat pump mini split type units. And obviously standard is this building will qualify for the highest efficiency levels for Efficiency Vermont. And so it's, R31 in the walls, R60 on the roof. Basement walls, obviously this will have a full basement for storage, so all the basement walls will be insulated. R30 between floors. It's the whole zip system, and not only is it the zip system on the walls, but it's actually a zip system on the roof as well. So it's a very very tight building, and so because of that, every single unit actually will have its own fresh air delivery and return to each of the individual units, instead of typically it's just been to the common areas. So this will actually have individual return supplies and returns to each of the apartments as well.
Fantastic. That's they're struggling to implement that in many places, so this will be a fun project for us to track.
Admittedly, it's actually going to be built very similar to 11 Park next door as far as the efficiency goes. And there's Efficiency Vermont actually has what I would consider some the incentives that they're offering in past times. The incentives didn't really meet up with the additional costs. Because obviously the return on the efficiency it's slow, and it's definitely out in time. So what you're seeing now is the efficiencies that The Deficiency Vermont is actually offering now, it does meet up with, it blends pretty well with the additional work and costs that go into actually, building buildings of this quality.
Is that within the last 24 months?
A couple of years. Yeah, it's gotten better over the last couple of years. There's actually also federally, there's actually some good programs out there as well for building these sort of buildings also. So there's a lot of programs that are slowly making, for developers, are making buildings like this more palatable.
It's still stunning when you think that what the so-called clean heat standards and other things, that you're going to end up with a building that doesn't burn any fossil fuels for heat, which,
Yeah, this is also going
we're all
to,
headed there.
this will also have an array on the roof as well.
Okay. I only had one other comment, if we're still working on comments, and so if you go back to the bird's eye view, Chris, and it has to do with the side setback and the scale difference between this building and the next residential building over. And I'm a little nervous about that. It's substantial.
I'm the residential.
Yeah, well, we're not quite ready for you yet,
No, I'm
but
trying to see the map.
oh, you can't see it?
No.
Okay, and you haven't probably seen the drawings yet either?
No.
Okay. So the part of this that bothers me is that there is a buffer requirement between multifamily district buildings and adjacent single-family homes, and it's required at 15 feet. And I don't know that we can waive that. I know that we can waive the buffer materials and trees and so forth, but I'm a little nervous about the setback being 15 feet and not 10, and you're kind of right on the 10 line there, or pretty close to it.
Well, the building is actually greater than 10. The parking lot actually is right at 10, but the building envelope itself is actually greater than 10.
12 and a half.
12 and a half.
Yeah. We did that so hopefully we did that so all the overhangs would be outside of the 10 as well.
Yeah.
And we are proposing a fence along that property line.
Well, there is a fence right now. There's also a maple tree bigger than 3 people could get their arms around that we're preserving. And then actually the garage of next door is actually built almost on the property line.
Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering whether that was a living unit or not. So if it's a garage, I'm less worried about it. But
It is a garage.
yeah. Do you have this one, Chris?
Yep.
Really kind of shows the. Anyway, I'd love to hear some input from staff or other board members, but I'm just not aware that we have the ability to waive the 15 feet. I know we can waive some things, but I don't know if I can waive it.
Yeah, as far as I know, you can only waive it in
In the village
the
center.
village center.
Yeah. So, anyway, we'll come back to that, but I think that's gonna end up being a little bit of a sticking point. In that we really don't have the ability to change.
Yeah, this was not brought up by, this wasn't brought up by staff at the original
Yeah.
meeting.
We thought
It was always proposed to us at 10 feet because we had a lot of discussions in regards to the 10-foot setback.
Yeah.
And this is
Well,
newly proposed to us.
Yeah, let's go through the meeting a little bit here and see what else transpires. Those were my only 2 comments. I actually thought the rest of the project was very well put together and nicely packaged up. Anyone else have something they wanted to talk about that was in the staff note or comments?
So right now, the buffer is, you're at 10.
The building itself is like we talked about, is about 12 and a half.
And what is
the
our?
parking lot in the rear is pretty much right at 10.
Oh, okay. I mean, So can't you just, it's not built yet, can't you just move it over?
We can, I mean, we can look at a lot of things.
Anyway.
We were trying to preserve a little green space in between the parking lot and the building. At that spot, I guess we would have the ability to shift it. Again, we're sort of just hearing this right this second.
Then if you shift it, don't you make more green space?
We'd make more
On the
green
other
space,
side.
Oh,
but not in between the parking lot and the building, in between the two buildings.
Yeah.
But it would kind of be not green space that anybody's gonna see. I mean, no one's gonna be behind that building. Right now, it's just a very low swale in the back of the building that will be used for stormwater infiltration, pretty much.
If you want, we can go through the rest of it.
Yeah, let's go through the rest of it because it is what it is on paper at the moment, and you're pretty close. But I just, before it gets out of hand, I want to make sure that we're, we have some leeway in some things, but if we don't have leeway, then that's the thing. So, all right. So I don't have any more comments from the board. Staff, did you want to touch on anything that's in your thing? We do have a landscaping plan from TJ Boyle, so I'm sure Nick will have something to say about that in a few minutes.
I do know one aspect that Mike and Chris talked about today was I guess there is an additional waiver. The light posts are at 16 feet and not 15 feet. I think that Mike was saying that it just produces better light and it made more sense to him. So that was a waiver that Mike and Chris talked about pretty much this afternoon, I think. Yep. Sort of the light post itself is 15 feet, and then it will sit on a concrete pedestal that's a foot off the ground.
So yeah, and I was told that the lighting plans that we see with the lighting grid is reflective of 16 feet. If you force it down to 15, that the numbers will change and the brighter spots, dimmer spots.
I don't think the foot would make it a drastic change.
I can't imagine anyone would notice myself, but again, if it's, this is where we get into the thing, do we actually have the authority or ability to modify that or not?
Right, so lighting is different. Lighting in the LDC, it's you have to meet those standards unless approved by the city engineer. City engineer has looked over it and he's fine with it as long as you're fine, as long as the DRP is fine.
So it's a 15-foot pole and we just happen to stick it on a 1-foot pedestal so it won't get whacked by the
cars.
lawnmower.
Essentially, that's the way that Mike described it
Yeah.
in the communications with me.
All right, well, I'm not worked up about that. All right, so board, nothing else?
I have one more question.
Okay.
So in all the drawings, I don't see any HVAC equipment sticking out the side, but if you're up to the side setback, there's a limit of how much you're allowed to encroach. I think one more foot in with HVAC equipment if needed, and at the top it can be 2 feet. I don't see any over here. I just want to confirm if there's any visible.
You're not going to see any of it. It's all going to be on the roof.
Okay.
So.
But and on the roof, is it going to stick out more than 2 feet?
No.
Oh, no, perfect.
So it's got solar up there. I've got equipment up there. Usually, like if you think of a hotel, a lot of the when you're in the room, there's something in the room with you that has the heating and cooling equipment in it, or the ductwork, or the fans, or something.
Yeah.
But you don't actually. You might see a grill on the outside, but it doesn't stick out.
Right.
We do have a transformer in front. It's on on the site plans.
Yeah, that's on the site plan.
We screened that
Oh yeah, yeah.
as best we could. As you as we discussed, obviously the power load in the building is going to be quite drastic, so it had to be a pad mounted transformer.
So you've got a tree, and just as long as we're talking about that, you've got a big tree in front of that, which I'm guessing, you know, is gonna be a beautiful tree, but the canopy is gonna be up here and the transformer is gonna be sitting right there. And you've got the shrubbery behind it, so it's screened from the building, but we probably want to screen it from the street and the sidewalk, so maybe you need just some more of the shrubs there to,
All I know is one side's got to be open.
yeah.
So just for access.
Yeah.
So you can basically screen 3 sides, but with whatever you want. But GMP's pretty insistent about having access to.
Yeah, I think we're saying the public doesn't necessarily want to see it. And if it's on your site, it might be something that your site people are gonna
Yeah.
deal with, but the,
So we can just flip flop the.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. You're just talking flip flop to, yeah, that's fine. Yep.
or what, I don't know which side it's an end or a side or whatever.
I mean, those transformers can spin in circles, so we can just have the access side be into the parking lot.
Yep.
And put the bushes on the Pearl side. I don't see that being an issue at all.
Okay. All right, anything else, Chris? I'm trying to get to the members of the audience, because I know they're, so
I don't
how,
have anything else.
how about members of the audience that would like to speak about this project?
I am at 225 Borough. I am a little ranch house. So how close is this building to my home? Is it closer than the duplex is right now?
I will see if I can figure that out. It is not closer than the duplexes that are there right now, which are practically on the property line. So that's the second building back.
It will be closer than the duplex.
That's what it sounds
Out
like,
front,
because
but
the
it-
house out back,
It's the house off.
But
the
it,
duplex is
Okay.
further away than the house out back.
but
Yep.
it will not be closer than the garage right now.
Well, the garage is right against the tree, so
Yeah.
how far back away from the garage are you gonna be? I'm talking your garage, that's there now you're tearing.
So
down.
the-
Well, right now you have the duplex that is there. You obviously have the driveway that's in between.
Correct, yes.
So that driveway, that curb cut goes away.
So the driveway's gone?
Yes.
And the building's there?
And the building comes closer.
I want an 8-foot fence. I want an 8-foot decorative fence because I need privacy on my property and I need protection. I mean, it's me.
There is an
I'm
exist.
in a little ranch house and I don't want anybody to have any way accessing, walking across onto my property at all.
So we are showing a
There's
fence.
a fence out back.
No, but we were showing a fence on the plans right now. So we do.
Oh, on
intend-
your plan?
Yeah. we-
How far and how big a fence is it?
I don't think we specified that, but if 8 feet.
Could I have an 8-foot decorative fence, please?
Oh, we
I
can.
want it decorative. And
Um,
if you look at my property, it's very, very, very well kept.
yeah,
And
okay.
I'm trying to keep me looking good and safe. I need to be safe. I gotta make sure people can't just walk on my property.
All right,
Are you
so
gonna
they
have
can't,
lighting as well back there?
There's no reason to have lighting back there.
so I'm thinking you don't really want lighting back there, because then you'll be seeing the lighting, but let me just respond to the fencing piece.
Okay.
And I don't know, you still have a screen on that, because I can't really see it looks shaded. That's the way it's supposed to look.
So right.
That's the way.
All right,
Page
so,
one.
so,
Can I go up to the, can I go up to?
Yes.
Would you like? I can put on Google if
no, that's fine.
Doesn't do me any
So the fence, there's an interesting thing with the fence, and I think the village has a limit on fences at 6 feet unless you
unless you get a permit. I mean, there's.
so you gotta, it's part of the permit. Now, the difference between a 6-foot fence and an 8-foot fence, I don't know. But, we're extremely close to that property line, and, we should be 15 feet with buffering, and we're a little less than that, which we're gonna deal with separately.
So you're
But
gonna work on that end of it, 15-foot thing?
I think we have to, because the code says 15 feet. But we also have a buffering requirement, which would require that 15 feet to be additionally buffered with vegetation to help screen, right? So now you can start to get some taller vegetation in there, not gonna show up right away, but it'll take a while. You'll get the we can look at that on the landscaping plan and see where we are with that. And there is quite a bit of material there. It looks like we're screening the garage more than the house, and so we may want to move some of that around. But the material's there.
I think the reason it's because of that massive tree that's there now.
Big tree, yeah.
I think what Mike was thinking, that if he plants anything under the canopy of that large tree, it's just gonna die.
Yes.
So that's why we added the fence as well. There is an existing fence right now that's on the property line. It goes from, I'm pretty sure, the back corner of our existing garage out pretty much to the edge of the bank.
Yeah, I do. I just want some, because right now I've got the garage that buffers me, that you'll be taking down. But then it'll be all open, I just want to make sure nobody can walk onto my property.
Yep. And so,
Go ahead, Lee.
and so,
15 feet is gonna be a problem, I mean, anyway, right?
What?
They're gonna look at it.
It's gonna be 15 feet, it's 15 feet.
From the property line to the face of the, the major face of the building, I think is what it's gonna end up being 15 feet.
Yeah,
And-
was it without the overhang?
No, it's,
Without the overhang. So the overhang's allowed to encroach, and there's some little ribbon detailing on the building that probably is also gonna push in there, but it wouldn't read as the face of the building. It'll read as little projections. So,
Where's the ridge pole though?
it's flat roof, so there's no ridge.
Which way is the water gonna run?
so water,
the
water's internally collected in the building and goes
Oh, you
down.
got, oh, you got it right now.
Yeah, yeah, they need to manage all the water, so you won't, it's not gonna pour off the roof, for example. They're gonna
There'll be
collect.
no water that goes from our property
So over to mine, or,
anywhere besides into the back.
okay.
I did a stormwater review of this. It actually could probably go all the way through state stormwater just because of the soils that we have on site. It's very sandy, has great infiltration. We are adding some deep catch basins that will also have holes in those catch basins to allow for more water. We did a few soil test pits on this site, as well as we've done borings and found that the water during the borings, which was done in kind of late March, early April, which you normally expect to see a pretty high water table, and we found water about 30 feet. So we have plenty of room to get water into the ground and expect it all will go into the ground.
so the three trees that are proposed right there, you can see on the landscaping plan, those are Armstrong maples as they're labeled.
And I see 6 of them, right? Because there's 3 up front and 3 back toward the garage, and they're on either side of the big.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. They're on either side of the big tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Julie's garage on that side it's right on, I mean, as you can see, it's pretty close
Yeah.
to the property line.
What's the height of those trees? When planted outside?
I mean, I think they're between 2 or 3 inch caliper, so they won't be very big when they're planted.
We just bought one. They're in a 2.5, 3-inch caliper tree is about 12 feet high, plus or minus the
I'm gonna say
growing.
15.
Yeah.
They'll be
They can
tall.
be-
They'll be taller than the fence.
So how are you doing the fence? Are you going from, of course, I got one side of my house, which is smaller, but it'll be taller than that one. All the way back to the back fence, or all the way back to toward the ravine?
I think we were gonna have to probably discuss that with you because it
Okay.
didn't make a ton of sense anyways to have
I can't
Two.
hear, sorry, I'm getting older.
yeah. It didn't make a ton of sense to have 2 fences right next to each
I
other.
understand,
So we have to put our fence on our property.
I understand.
But at that point, I think your fence, you can decide, but we had intended on running the fence the entire length of the property.
Okay, because the only other thing I do is roof rake, of course, that side of the garage, gets a slanted roof in the winter, I have to roof rake the snow off.
Mhm.
So I assume the fence will be 10, 15 feet back?
No, it's going to be right on the property
It'll be on
line,
the property.
which is almost on your garage. I mean, your garage is about that far from the property line.
So if I have to roof rake, can I go on your property to put my roof on the roof,
Well,
on the
that-
rake
I
on
mean,
the roof?
They're really, in all honesty, I mean, it doesn't. And we can have this discussion off. It doesn't
I
have to
just
be
wanna
done.
make sure I'm
It doesn't have to be done here because, in my opinion, your garage is so close to the property line, a fence in that location doesn't serve much of a purpose, right?
Which I don't have now, I understand.
Exactly. So, I mean, we could certainly come to a side agreement where if that garage was ever eliminated for whatever reason, then we could certainly add a fence at that time. But
Or maybe a fence going like this, almost attaching to my garage, so nobody can come around.
yeah, I
Does
mean,
that make sense with a gate, and then I can at least?
well, I mean, right? Yeah, I mean, we can.
Can we talk about that,
Yes, we can
please?
talk about that
Okay.
for sure. And because, in all honesty, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense
I
for
don't know
us.
Where am I here? Okay.
It probably doesn't make a lot of sense because right now here's
Sorry,
the big
you're
tree.
fine. Yep.
You have a fence from the tree to here.
Correct, I do.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a
so
smaller one, yes.
I mean, we can very easily propose a fence that eliminates your fence, and it's the same fence basically.
I can't. My husband built it when he had cancer. The deer died. That fence can't come
Okay,
down.
then that's fine too.
It's very, very sentimental.
Oh yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I know the story.
And that was
It's
a,
all back to the
Yeah.
yeah,
board level.
anyway, okay, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
We can do
we-
the
yeah,
corner, just
we-
to protect me, okay?
We can meet out there and we can walk the site. We can figure it out.
Let me ask Randy, he's helping me here.
Okay.
so
Yeah, no problem.
I think we're set then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And your
thanks.
name was?
So-
It's Brett.
I'll
Brett.
get you on here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Brett
and you
Grabowski.
spoke. You know Kim.
Kim, no.
Kim works for me. She went and talked to you right after we purchased the property. Used to work with
I
her.
don't have her number though. Okay, yes, she did. She
Yeah.
absolutely did.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna summarize.
Okay.
We have a setback issue from either 10, 12, 15 feet from the property line to work through. And we have a fence agreement that may or may not happen outside of this format. And when you come back, I think we'll enjoy hearing how it all worked out. But it sounds like you're both willing to talk about it, which is the best. So I'll leave it at that. Are there other members of the audience that have something to say? I'll go with Gabe first, and then we'll come to Nick.
Chris, can you put the screen back on where the building and my building next door, please?
This one? So it's gonna take
The-
a moment. The render, right?
Yes, the big rendering.
It's coming up. Ready?
Gabe is the property owner on the other side.
Yes, I own the building on the other side. I got built in 2009, and after I got approved by this board, we discovered there was only a 4-inch water line from 197 all the way down to the Wilson Road.
Yes.
So I couldn't build the building unless we put an 8-inch line. So I came, saw Dave Crawford at the time, was the town manager. I said, Dave, how are we gonna fix this problem? He said, we have no money. So if you wanna build, you put the water line in. I said, if I put the water line in, am I gonna be compensated?
One sec. We're asking, Marcus, the city councilor is asking that attendees get up to the mic to speak. So that's, yeah. Right here.
Didn't hear me? I thought it was loud enough. Okay, I'll go back to the beginning. In 2009, I got approved for the 38 units at 235 Pearl Street. After approval, prior to doing the sprinkler system testing, we found out there was only a 4-inch water line coming down Pearl Street all the way to the ends of Susie Wilson Road. And at the time was a yellow hydrant in front of the building. I thought that was a fire hydrant. Come to find out, it was only a flushing hydrant to flush the 4-inch line. So it was no service for fire service on the whole section of the road. So at the time, I came visit with Dave Crawford as the town manager, and he informed me there was no money to invest putting a new line in. So I said, how about if I take the initiative cost myself and do it? Can I be recompensated somewhere down the road as people hook onto this 8-inch line? He said, possibly. Well, since then, from 2009 till now, I'm the only guy hooked up on that 8-inch line 3 times, like 3 buildings there. But now Mr. Grabowski's hooking onto it. And at the time, it cost me $330,000. That was in 2009. Today, it would cost over $1 million to do that same water line. But so I'm just asking if anywhere I get maybe some compensation for the 8-inch line, because nobody has hooked onto it. He'll be the first one now besides me. So I just leave it at that.
Well, it's all new information to this board, and I'll have to pass that along to Chris and the city officials to sort that out. But it sounds like a wonderful gesture on your part many years ago, and I wish you all the best. You got my vote, but I don't know how it works yet. All right. Anything else about the project, Gabe?
No, I think the building is a great addition to the street, and I'm very happy that we finally get out of these old houses and,
Yeah.
Better than the crack dens that are there.
yeah, it's definitely a plus.
Good. Nick, landscape
Yeah.
or anything
I'm
else?
wearing my tree hat, yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the project a lot too. We're focusing on that big tree and it's beautiful now. Unfortunately, the construction is probably going to wipe out about half the root system on one side by the time you do your foundation work in there. So I would be looking at having other materials in there put in after the project is completed, and not to rely on that as being the big screener. And hopefully it survives, but maples don't take to it very well, and you're going to be probably like 5 feet from the trunk by the time you do the excavation. Working on it.
We'll have to see what the overdig is. We can do some things to not have to do a typical overdig close to the tree.
Is there a full foundation underneath?
Yes, there is.
Oh, so it goes a little bit.
I'll also quickly mention that right now the current garage is against the side of the tree.
Yeah, yeah.
So right now, there's already a building restricting some of the root system.
That has been there a long time, that garage, I assume.
That little one, yeah.
Yeah, the fresh impact might have a effect on it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do everything we can in regards to,
Well, it sounds like we might want to preserve some of the landscaping budget to account for some replacement plantings there, if that works. But
Can I speak a little about the tree? Because it does shade my property, and I don't have air conditioning. So if we can save it, I really would like.
oh, we want to save
Because,
it. There's no question about it.
I had it trimmed this spring. I spent money to trim it. I trimmed your side too, because I did the whole tree. I thought, I want to do it for the neighbors to hang it on your garage, so I took the initiative to keep it up.
We will have to, on our side, we will have to limb some,
I understand.
some big, large limbs that'll have to go from our side, which is fine. It's, in all honesty, it'll probably help the tree in the long run as far as.
Who owns, like, whose property is the
it's
tree?
dead smack on the
So
property.
it's,
Yeah.
so it's both people?
It's dead on the line.
So
Yeah.
it's-
Work done on
It's like I said, three people couldn't wrap their arms
Oh.
around it.
It's a 60-inch oak. It's a 5-foot oak.
Oh, it's-
So you're gonna talk more about the 15-foot issue at some point?
We'll comply with it. I mean, there's no question about it.
Okay. But that is fine.
We have room to shift the building. It won't affect any of the ADA access. As you can see, kind of in that corner, it's a little bit thicker to give a little bit more outside space to the front of the building, but there's room in there to shift it. If
And we're
we just didn't
couple of feet, I think.
we just didn't know about it until right now, so I'm happy to do that.
All right, so I'll summarize that there, at least in my opinion, they're really only there's only the one issue of the property line and the edge and the fence and all that. I think everything else has been, we talked about the drive aisles and the parking of trucks that we're fine with. We talked about the light posts that are the right height, but they're on a plinth. So I think we're okay with that. I don't have anything else on my list. Anyone?
We talk about the waiver for the parking spaces.
As an account? I don't think we talked about it.
We
but
didn't.
We discussed that pretty heavily in
The
concept.
first meeting.
We provided Brett provided a
Parking scenario or parking.
Yeah.
Study from.
all
Right.
of these units are single bedroom units. So there's I think 58 spaces that we're proposing.
48.
48 spaces, sorry about that.
I didn't have a concern. I was just bringing it up
Yep.
because it was bolded.
All right. Anything else we forgot to?
Yeah, and then I'll just bring this up too in regards to the way it's written. So in this design of this building, there's 34 units, but 6 of those are actually 1 bedrooms. So it actually has a separate bedroom with a door.
Rather than a studio.
Rather than just an open studio, just for clarification.
Yeah, I was fine with it after the last meeting, I think. And the counts were well documented, and I know that pretty much every time we see a requirement for, and I meant to actually talk to you about this, we'll get to the PC, but the parking requirements that call for two cars per unit are kind of outdated, and
That is in the next review.
Yeah.
That's in the current,
Yeah.
the changes that are currently being considered.
Yeah, okay. So I see that we keep ending up with waivers for parking, and so at some point we probably ought to fix that.
Yeah, we ended up next door here with the 48 studios we have at 11 Park. We actually have less than 1 car per unit.
Yeah. And, frankly, the notion that you're on highway, arterial, or a transit line, or all of these, and you're serving that population, there's I'll waiver those all day long. So, yeah, great. So I'm ready to close the hearing. If everyone else
So I would suggest if there's still such
continue it, right? Table.
Right. I would continue. If we're looking for potentially needing major changes like shifting the building, I would suggest keeping it open.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that
I don't
major.
I don't see that as a major change either, as long as these guys can.
I mean, we can work with staff and show staff the final plan of the building. We're just going to move it through. We're basically going to move it 2 feet. I mean, right now we're at, or maybe 2.5 feet. Because right now, if we were to put a measure on where the building is and the property line, you can see we're already basically, probably 13.5 or 13. So we're really, that building's going to shift 2 feet to the whatever, is that south, east, west?
It feels like a major change, even though I know it's technically not. I mean, we can all conceptually say, okay, we're just moving the building. I know it's an engineering wise, it's kind of a big thing, but conceptually, it's not to me a big thing, because if they say they have the room to do it, and then it's not bad. So normally I would say, well, they have to come back, but the only 2 things we have are the actual placement of the building, so satisfying the 15 feet and working the fence out with the neighbors and having the landscaping, I mean, really it all possible protection given to that massive existing tree, I think are the only outstanding issues that I have. And
Makes sense.
And if staff wants or the board wants, we can even have Mike, TJ Boyle come up with a, more detailed plan in regards to protecting the tree.
yeah. On the tree committee, is that anything you guys have the expertise to do? Is Warren still on that? Does he have similar
it's
expertise?
Essentially outline the area of where no construction takes place, and probably if you're gonna be limiting some of them, that'll take some of the stress off the root system on that side. I think if you work with TJ Boyle, that would probably be the best thing. We'd be glad to come over and look at it.
So I think we have the expertise on both sides of the table here. We can do our best, right? Yeah.
Is Warren still?
Well, he's on the tree committee.
Yeah,
so
but he's on the.
yeah. I think he's retired. He does.
Yeah,
but
he's
you don't lose the knowledge. You just
Yeah, no.
He's the
yeah.
tree warden
Use
of
it differently.
Essex Junction as well.
Yeah, he,
Okay. All right. So all of that said, I'm comfortable closing the public hearing if the rest of the board thinks this is going to
You
work.
might want to check if anyone on Zoom has anything to say. I don't think they haven't. Nobody said anything.
Is there any hands raised or any of that?
There are no. No hands raised.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing's closed. I think we already have a motion available to us unless there's any further discussion on this. Which probably reads something like staff's recommendations plus compliance with the 15-foot setback. An update, a more clarified fence arrangement with a 6-foot or taller fence. And I think that we heard that the applicant is willing to talk to the neighbor about the fence, and there's, I don't think we want to end up with 2 fences along that line, but it looks like the existing fence something has to happen to the existing fence. So, I would suggest that staff has the ability to sort through the fence. We know that the future fence will likely be on the property line with possibly some interference from the garage and some ability for the neighbor to be able to continue to clear snow. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but snow's gonna, if it's raked, the snow will fall off onto her side of the fence. She just needs access to be able to do it. So, good neighbors should make that work, but staff's gonna approve whatever language they come up with for that.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Any other, do we have to specifically note that the light poles are set on a base and we're still fine with it?
Well,
Like if the
That-
base ends
you're-
up 4 feet high, I'm not gonna be happy, but
Yeah.
it's
you should
still,
state it. Yeah.
okay. The 15-foot poles on a 1-foot base are acceptable.
And the parking waiver.
And the parking waiver. Is the parking waiver already in the notes?
Parking waivers in the notes.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to actually make that motion?
That was a lot of words.
Well, you don't have to restate
You
it.
can
Just
just
say
say
so moved. and
So
then-
moved.
All right. Anyone seconding?
I'll second.
All right. Any remaining discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
gentlemen. Thank you. Great project. Couple of wrinkles to iron out and you're off to the races. All right, one more tonight. We have a conceptual site plan to construct a 3-story mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor and 34 residential units with parking at 8 Railroad Street in the Village Center District by Franklin South LLC owner, Gabe, and we've got some civil and architectural support tonight. Okay, awesome. Take it away, team.
Sure. David Burke from O'Leary Burke. As you said, this is a concept plan for 8 Railroad Street. 8 Railroad Street had a 4-unit apartment building on it. To the north is Essex Agency, and to the south is another small apartment building. The 4-unit apartment building had a major fire and was since removed. The parcel, as you see at the frontage, is 66 feet wide. At the back, it bumps out and it's 90 to 135 feet wide, almost a half an acre in size, 0.49. The zoning for the parcel is Village Center. In the Village Center, it's a minimum 5,000 square foot lot size. So we're at 21,400, about 400 plus % over the minimum. There are 0 setbacks in the village center district. There is no maximum density in the village center district. However, the board has the jurisdiction on that to make sure that all the land development codes are being met with the density that's proposed. And there's no max lot coverage. Again, the board has the ability to look at everything being met. In the village center district, 4-story buildings up to 58 feet in height are allowed. And it actually states that buildings have to be at least 2 stories. It's kind of the amped up version of what you just heard on the last 2 proposals. The village center, as you've seen across the street here, that's what the zoning is intended for. This proposal is for 3 stories. It's 34.5 foot high structure, so it's about 14 feet. I'm sorry, about almost 24 feet, less than the maximum. The proposal is for 34 residential units. All those units will be on the 2nd and 3rd floor. They are comprised of 27 1-bedroom units and 7 2-bedroom units. Underneath the building, it's structured parking, and you've got 25 spaces under the building and 9 spaces outside of the building where that lot, gets wider, for a total of 34 spaces. So there's a proposal for 34 spaces and 34 units. At the front of the building, the access is under the building on the north side, and the south side of the building is both a small commercial space as well as the lobby, entrance to the stairs, etc., for the building. So it's a combined space. It's approximately 1,600 square feet. About half and half of that, about half of it is going to be commercial, and half of it is going to be lobby, etc., for the residential units. What doesn't show on the plan now is a entrance door for the residential units from the street, and Gabe is going to have that added to that lobby area, so there will be a door directly from the street. The 0 setback, the reason this building is, well, I'm kind of jumping into the staff notes, John, and I've got the ones that that staff is looking for comments on and or suggesting that the board look for comments on, and I'd be happy to start on those. And if I skip one that you wanted to talk about, or if I'm not talking about one long enough, just let me know. Does that work? Section 604A, staff points out that we are in the village center district. You do have design review, and that staff is suggesting that the proposed 3-story building is in line with the intent of the village center district. I know there'll be more comments on that, and there'll be more detail on that also at the next step. On 604C, on setbacks, for clarification, it's 2 things. We want to have some space in the front of this building, a little bit of space in the front of the building, but the real reason that the building is set back and not right on the right-of-way line is there's a major power transmission main, and Green Mountain Power told us how close we can get to it, and the building is right at that line. So the building is as close as we can be to Railroad Street, because Green Mountain Power will not change that line. That was a meeting with Gabe and I and Green Mountain Power. On the side, staff notes suggest that it's a 0 setback. At the very back of the building, it's almost on the line, but it's generally 2 to 3 feet from the south side, the Gaines Court side. Again, it's a 0 setback zone here. On the north side, it's 30 feet at the back of the building and much more in the middle of the building from the north line. On section 606E, we acknowledge that this is subject to design review, and we pointed out that per 604A, staff's initial look at this feels that it is. On section 606F on parking, both our cover letter and the submittal that I did, which was an update to previous parking study that I did on some of Gabe's buildings on Pearl Street. I went back out because we met with Terry Haas and Jeff Fusner on this project a few months back, probably more than a few months back, probably 6 months back. And they liked that information, but said it was outdated. If you can update it, that'd be great. So I went out every morning at 6 a.m., I think 4 mornings in a row, and I went out about 10 p.m. at night. I live in the village, so it wasn't far of a drive, and I counted parking spaces, counted cars and parking spaces. And the numbers came out slightly less, but pretty much the same as they had 5 years before. It came out as a high of 0.95 spaces per unit and an average of 0.88 spaces per unit. And he's got a mix of 1s and 2s in those other locations. Those locations, as John mentioned in the previous application, they're on the transit. They have all of the benefits of not being car-centric. The building that Gabe is about to open, he's got 30 units rented. 7 of the folks have no car. That's a 0.77 ratio on what he's got so far there. And I think it'll be probably less here because this is more central than any of those locations. You can certainly get anywhere from this location. You've got everything that the other locations have, but you have much more commercial use around here and places to eat, etc., by walking. So I was incorrect in the cover letter and my information that we're asking for a waiver. In fact, we're not asking for a waiver. In the Village Center District, there is no parking requirement. The parking requirement is up to you. So there is no 2 spaces per unit plus 10, plus the 1 per 10 visitors. It starts at 0 and it works up from there. So we're proposing 34, which is 1 space per unit. We feel that the 800 square feet of commercial space, at this time, the person across the street may be renting that location, ice cream shop. They're interested, but it's going to be walk up business for that. So we don't expect that that's going to, people are going to pull in to this parking area to then walk back through to enter a ice cream shop or whatever small commercial space will be there. The building, because it's 800 square feet, we would like you to look at this as a residential multi-use building. We felt it was important to have some kind of a streetscape with that commercial component at the front rather than just be an entire, because of this location, we think it's appropriate to have some kind of a storefront look at that location. So that was 606F. Again, we don't need a waiver, but we do need you to acknowledge that the existing parking is okay to the board. On 703C, staff states that the entrance has to be a minimum of 24 feet. We're showing 20. The architectural plan actually calls off 19 feet, 11 inches. I think we would certainly make sure that it was at least 20. I'm not sure if there's any leeway here. I looked at the regulations again. I think staff is pulling from the correct sections of the regulations. At first, I thought that the 24-foot was associated directly with your parking lots and the 24-foot aisle, which is a standard aisle in the parking lot. We have a 24-foot aisle. We do 20-foot entrances throughout Chittenden County. 24 feet is wider than most of your streets in the village, and it's absurd. But I don't know if you have the ability to waive it. If you do, we would like the 20 feet. If you don't, we'll make the commercial space, that area, a little bit smaller, and we'll get to the 24. When you go to the other section that it came up in, when I looked at your regs, it talks about, well, I guess I'll take that back. I think you might have some wiggle room if you want to use it. The commercial and industrial for driveway talks about two-way traffic requiring 24 feet. This is not a commercial or industrial use. It's a residential use. So we do meet the 24 for your parking. Would like consideration for the 20-foot for the access. I think it is would be much more attractive, and it's certainly adequate.
I believe that we have in the past interpreted the LDC as allowing waivers for that width, and I would support 20 feet for that as well.
Okay.
For pedestrian access, pedestrian friendliness.
Great, thank you. Section 703K9, the commercial space will, I wanted to just clarify that the commercial space, which I already did, will include a lobby for the residents and will be revised to have that front entrance for the residents. We think that addresses the pedestrian question. They're either going to pull in their car and they have access to their units from the interior, or if they walk up, they're going to have that door at the front of the building, and they're going to walk in that way.
So is there another entrance at the back?
There is entrance from underneath,
Okay.
and there's also elevator underneath.
Right. Okay. So this over here is this an entrance as well?
Is that where the elevator is? The elevator's in the lobby.
Well,
There needs to be a
We
stair.
can, if I want to concede here for a minute to the architect.
Hi, Dan Goldsman. I'm the architect on this project. Touching the ground at the I guess it's the west side. There is that very small square that has the commercial space and the lobby. The lobby has a stair and the elevator. In the back is the second stairway. So you can, I'm assuming if a tenant has a key, they can access the stairway from the back if they're in the lot.
So the handicap spaces are next to the stairs, not next to the lobby? In the back?
We can
Currently.
Yeah,
something, this is conceptual, but that would
Got
have
it.
been something that our office did, not knowing exactly what was going on under the building.
the handicap spaces will be by the small lobby.
Yeah.
Ultimately by the elevator.
Got it.
Yep.
So is there an elevator in the back too, or no?
No,
Just a stairway.
Just the front.
Yeah.
Is the only handicap spot is in the back there, though?
There's two.
Currently, there are 3 back there.
Yeah.
Or two aisles and a space. How's it look? Yeah, they're.
Yeah, we will switch the locations, but for the amount of parking we're proposing, we're required to have 2 handicap spaces
And those are underground parking spaces?
under
Well, they're
under
under the
structure,
building.
at grade. Yep.
Seems like it would make sense to have those closer to where the elevator is, right?
Yeah.
We are
They're
going to
gonna-
move, we agree. So those will get moved. The section 705C, as I stated, is specific to commercial and industrial. but I'm hearing from staff that the 20-foot is supportable. I hope the board agrees with that. Section 705D4, staff supports the drive location. It's a widening of the existing drive location as far as the 25-foot setback. I would suggest in any future, I know you're doing some now, but you might consider in future land development code revisions that that's not a very good thing to have in your village center district with 0-foot setback, to have a 25-foot driveway setback. It would create a lot of problems if a different board felt that the 25-foot was important. Section 708.2, the proposed, this is getting into the buffering. The proposed building's multifamily. It's got that very small commercial component, but it's multifamily. So I feel that this section 708.2 does not apply to this proposal. I also suggest that 708.2, the second sentence, is the clarification that it talks about adjoining residential district. The adjoining district is village center, not residential. And
Or city.
and the adjoining, when it talks about residential, it talks about residential use. The residential use is on the other side of Gaines Court. So I think there's several things here, but the main thing is that this is a residential building. And on the other side, you've got the Essex agency, which is commercial building. Section 708.3, this section also clarifies a buffer zone of not less than 15 feet from the single-family use by stating to minimize the impact on adjoining single-family districts. Again, there's no adjoining single-family districts here.
It's referring to single-family uses.
And then the next line talks about the district.
Well, we're gonna have a lot of conversation about this piece because it seems to be the crux of the issue.
Yep,
So,
yep.
Yeah.
708.5, it talks about that if the board feels differently than I feel, that the buffer does not apply to this proposal, you have the ability to waive it using the undue adverse. I assume the undue adverse, there's nothing that I've seen in your regulations, so I assume you kind of look at the state standards, adverse first, and then if you feel it's adverse, the two-part test of is it undue adverse. This is a 3-story building that's 24 feet, 23 and a half feet less than can be allowed at this location. I don't think that's undue adverse. I think that this is what's expected for redevelopment in this area. Expected and encouraged. There was some language in 708.5 in the staff notes. This building does have residential units on both sides on the second and third floor. So there will be windows on the second and third floor. I found nothing in the regulations about light and air. And it's a 0-foot setback. And as anything, that's first come, first serve. If Gaines Court area got redeveloped, it may not be appropriate to have buildings 2 feet apart. But I don't see anything in your regulations on light and air. And we're up against Gaines Court, and we're meeting the greater than 0-foot setback. On the proposed stipulations, the only one that I would like your consideration to change is item 9, which is the 24 feet to 20 feet. If the board doesn't have heartburn on the amount of parking, the 20 feet and the drive aisle, I suggest, based on the staff notes, that the crux of the conversation is the buffer. And as stated in the last hearing, you have the ability to waive buffer if you feel it's appropriate in the village center district.
Yeah, I got a lot of heartburn about Gaines Court, and I don't understand some of the staff notes about the legal part of that. Like, it's not a real street, it's not a public right of way. So I don't quite understand how we deal with that, because it acts like a street and it serves as a street to the neighbors on it, which are all smaller, older houses that at some point will probably come down, but they're not down yet. So I need to know how we deal with that, and I don't know, Chris, if that's anything that you can help with, but Gaines Court if it's not a public right of way, it's a property line of some sort. It's clear that there's single family use going on that property, which when you introduce a multifamily building next to it seems to trigger the buffer piece for me. And the only other question I have is more of an architectural building life safety code issue, and that's if you build right up to your property line, what are the implications for rating? Like, I could have another building on the other side build right up to the property line, and then no one would have windows. So and you'd certainly be closer than the amount of distance that you have to be apart to have no fire rating on your outside wall. So we've had projects where the building itself was too close to the property line and there was no other building, but the fire marshal required us to rate the wall because it was too close to so I'm just bringing it up because I think there's a little more in there than just there's no setback, right? Because
we know there will be fire review, and what comes of the fire review we'll have to, work with, comply with. I think as well as I know, John, that this zone being a 0-foot setback, we meet the requirements, and and everything gets reviewed at the time it gets reviewed. If the Gaines Court area gets developed, as I said, it's certainly not appropriate for them to be right on the property line, but that's something that the board will review at that time. We can't factor that in at this point.
You may have to, though. That's
right. So
you can't take away somebody else's rights on their own property. Like, I have just as much right to come by and develop the Gaines Court property as you have the right to develop that property. So I'm not sure you can just say whoever gets there first. That doesn't sound like a legal argument to me, but
well, I'm not taking away their rights. Your codes are 0-foot setback. I'm complying to your codes. Section 708B 3, when you read it, it says any multifamily use adjacent to a single family use shall provide a buffer not less than 15 feet. The buffer zone shall be landscaped in such a manner to minimize impact on the adjoining single family district. I believe the intent of that is it's for single family districts, single family uses in single family districts. And that's why buffers can be waived in the village center district. So that's my reading of that as an ex-zoning board chair.
I think you're half right. So anyway, I just want to keep going back to what is Gaines Court? How do we?
It's a private street.
It's a private street. So it doesn't really exist.
Drive.
It just happens to be there. It's on the property of all those different properties, and none of them have their own access point. They all have. They've all agreed to share, or it's an existing condition, or whatever happens.
So I'll mention this. This is a little bit unusual in that usually when you have a bunch of residences that share the same private street, it would be it would be a separate parcel which come under common ownership and management. But in this case, at least according to the tax maps over here, these are the way the parcels show up.
Yeah.
So right, like so Gaines Court by this interpretation would it's just pieces of Gaines Court are part of each of these parcels.
Yes. That's what I'm.
And the first half of our lot on the plan that's up right now behind Chris, the red, that's a four apartment building, so that's not single family. So there's no question.
So are you talking about this one?
There's no question that the buffer discussion only applies once you get beyond that parcel.
And I'm in my version of the land development code. Maybe I think this is the right map, but it's calling out what's in yellow there. It actually on mine is multifamily residential 3 and not
a single family district.
Not a single family district.
Right. It's just a single family use. So I think it's up to, I think your interpretation of that will matter.
Right. So you have something that's probably different zoning, but the actual use of it at the moment is single family.
Now, I will say that this issue is currently being discussed in the land development code amendments. And if passed as currently proposed, the 15-foot buffer would not be required at all in the village center zoning district. But of course, it's currently under consideration.
What's the timeline for that deliberation?
They just warned the public hearing on it, right?
They technically have not warned it yet, but it will be. Public hearing is expected to be mid-June, and this if it's to pass, it has to pass by August, early August.
I happen to have an advanced copy.
This would be under screening and buffering. It's not under village center.
Not under the village center. All right. Well, I still
But
don't
it
know
that
that
doesn't apply yet. So.
I still don't know that we're gonna answer the whole question today. This is conceptual, so we're supposed to give you our feedback and generally, see how many legs this might have going forward. So I think that's the first question I have for me is just, can we with a straight face say that this building belongs next to that many single family homes that are
Only next to 2 single family, John. It's a multifamily in the front and it's a multifamily in the back.
I gotta say,
there's two abutting single family.
Has anybody ever been up Gaines Court and just tried to get in from the street with the phone pole on one side and the building on the other?
Phone pole is going to shift.
I feel like
he's hit it.
I donated a chunk of my land so they could take that pole and move it to open up the front so a fire truck could get in there.
Yeah, because the garbage trucks hit it on both sides. Is that the power line that's holding you guys back from?
They'll allow us to shift the pole laterally, because they didn't ask us to do that, but Gabe's hit it with his own plow, just his pickup plowing.
Yeah, it's rough.
And
it's a fascinating little vestige of something, but and the building on the right is. You guys don't want to take that one down too, do you?
Actually, that was purchased not too long ago.
Yeah, that's owned by somebody else, and it was purchased at quite a high price.
Yeah. Okay. So, what other concern? I have some concerns about the building. I know it's just an early rendering. I think the brick is. It's not the materials; it's just the delicacy of the use. I think there's some. There's quite a bit of language in the land development code about fitting into the general character of the surrounding buildings and trying to keep some rhythm and some balance between new and infill and existing and character. And I gotta say that whole street, Railroad Street is a major hodgepodge of, things that you probably wish weren't necessarily there, but they're there, right? So what we look to the next building to the north or west, which is the Handy building, which is actually a beautiful building. And we don't need them to necessarily look the same at all, but we're trying to say, find us a way to have the dialogue that is the streetscape of the village, former village, now city of Essex Junction, talk to each other. Like you need to be using the same vocabulary as you're not using this, using the same materials as only like you having the same letters. But now I need the speech to show up that the words are actually in the same language. So I'm looking for a little more work on that part of the project, the building itself. I kind of like the fact that it turns character and becomes something a little different going down the back, but it still looks kind of flat. And I'm imagining myself in one of the buildings on Gaines Court, leaving my front porch every morning and going, I've got this new building in front of me, and it probably should be a little more detailed along the side. So, you've got neighbors to attend to. The building itself is kind of interesting because, it also, the code talks about having a certain rhythm and pattern as you go down the street. This building is narrow at the street, but it goes back a long way, which when you're on the street, it's going to look pretty normal because the size of the facade facing the street is about the same as the other one. So that probably is easier to deal with that if we can get the delicacy of the building itself sorted out. I think having commercial on the ground floor is great because the street fronts along there are all trying to be a little more active, and residential doesn't always do that. The moving a door of some kind to the front, I think, is a big signal that, hey, we're being friendly and street facing. So I'm glad to hear you say that you were planning to do that. But I would still kind of go back and look at some of the other architectural clues that are present in many of the village buildings and start to play with those as the design progresses. And I think the more recent buildings along Maple Street are good examples of, it doesn't have to look the same, but the parts and pieces are there, and they help everybody read the building, and they provide some interchange and some fun that you can have there. You've got a little bit of a tricky path for yourself in that you've also got to leave a hole for the cars, right? So you've got this vehicle access, and I'll go, I'm fine with 20 as long as it's wider than Gaines Court. I think right? Yeah. So I had some other questions, and I wasn't sure if I was reading it, but there's it feels like with all the other driveways in the area that there would be a tremendous advantage to having some kind of an easement where you're not having to drive under like if the fire truck shows up, they're not going under there. They don't want to, but they're going to probably go down one of the neighbor streets to park and do their thing. I wonder if that applies to garbage and, any other kind of major vehicles that would need to get in there, an ambulance or something.
So it says potential easement, access easement right here.
Right. So I'm just saying that for me, that would, when you start talking about reasons vehicles need to show up at your building, and can you accommodate them, and are you by default using your neighbor's property. I just wonder whether there's some other agreement that's in place and, you know, that says, okay, we don't mind if the fire trucks have to come, you know, you're naturally, you can get in there, but where does the, how does the garbage truck get in there to empty the dumpster, you know?
I already obtained, John, I hate to interrupt you, an easement from my cousin next door.
So you have,
To use the drive, but like you say, the rubbish truck and the
Yep.
fire trucks.
so that's not the potential easement, that's some other easement that you have in there?
There's
So-
an easement to bring the power into.
I think on
Yeah.
the concept plan at the time,
Yeah.
we put potential easement, but since then, you know, Gabe's had the discussions.
Great.
So we would have to have a written, we know we need a written easement as part of that.
Just ticking off my concerns, right? So I am a little unhappy about the setback from the street in that it's actually wouldn't be bad if the building on the corner of Gaines Court wasn't added onto in front. You can kind of see, and you know, if you guys are reading the screen there, you can see where the original building was, and then the next building down, they kind of line up with the face of your building.
Yeah, and if that property ever gets redeveloped, they're gonna run into the same thing as we did.
Yeah.
Green Mountain Power is gonna say you have to be that far.
Yeah,
you know.
and
We're right at the, I mean, we argued it,
Yeah.
we're right at the minimum.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's only 12 feet, and it offers us the opportunity to do something unique there.
Mhm.
You know, as far as benches and different things for the residents and for the commercial space.
Yeah.
So I think it could be a feature versus a negative.
Yeah, it because the neighbors are, and I would call them non-conforming, like it's the biggest mistake I've ever seen that they, you know, a wooden building there got,
Added on to.
yeah. But most of the time you just sort of shut your eyes and keep going. But hopefully that gets straightened out, and then I think the face of your building will make a lot more sense. So that
Now, John, just for Dan's purposes here, I'll stand up for the conceptual work that he's done so far, because I'd like to, a little further clarity, the input that we received from staff, former staff and some current staff, was that the Essex agency, as you said, is a prominent building. And that's why this is brick, that's why this is flat roof, that's why, you know, so it's trying to not deviate that much from the Essex agency building,
Mhm.
rather than, you know, it is.
I'm just saying it, you know, stylistically and all the other things that we get to look at in the review that talk about not subtracting from the character of the village, but infilling and maintaining the village character, city character. And it's hard to do that. It's been a village for so how long, right? That I think if you read that language, you'll be, and there's like 2 pages of it, so there's a lot of stuff. You know, it talks about many things. I think it's pushing you towards being a little more historic in the treatment and a little less modern. And that's, I'm not saying that necessarily we're saying you can't do modern, but I think you've got to just be careful to have enough of the language of the historic in there, whether it be trim or detailing or you know, doing things with the brick or something. You know, you've got to play a little bit of the game there to be friendly to the neighbors. And you know, you don't have anything to work with on the Gaines Court side, but you know, the view is a little wider than that in the big picture. So and then after that, I think just the building is long. I mean, you're abutting 3 properties going down Gaines Court and a couple more on the other side. You've got churches, you've got you know, village vernacular. There's some good things to work with there, and it's going to mean a little bit more detailing, I think, on the further development of that. But you know, the material selection, clabbered brick, that's right down the middle. You can't, you want to be there, I think. But the treatment just needs to start showing a little more.
So do you want the building to look more old-timey, as it were, more
I'm not trying to say exactly that, but if you think about the parts of if you think about the language of those buildings, it's more than just where the openings are and how much brick versus whatever. It's, if you look at the column that you have out there on the outer leg of that parking thing, it's really thin, right? So that's like, Corbusier meets, Olmsted here or something. If you've got to work on just getting the balance right, I think.
So, at this conceptual stage, I'd say that it was very intentional, the desire for it to look a bit more contemporary.
Yeah.
In contrast to the building next door, and in contrast to some of the ones across the way there by the train station. So the hope was to highlight the new building and the existing building in that way. Now, if that was the scheme at one point. If that's not going to fly with the board,
well, you may find, so here's the thing. So you're doing things with the fabric that brick doesn't want to do, right? Like, it doesn't like being unsupported across big spans with no visible support, right? That's a very modern technique at the bottom there. You might be better off without the brick, or all the brick, like just be a little more visible in what's happening there. Because, right, you take away all those support lines and all the things that you come to know as these are how brick buildings work, because most of them were built before they were just veneers. It doesn't look like that. I mean, the language doesn't look like that, even if the building could. So you're showing me a more contemporary view that isn't necessarily what brick does, right? So the other ones that we've seen, mostly people are using metal panels and, fancy wood looking siding and that, and it's easier to believe those because, it's not brick and it's not supposed to do this.
You mean the car opening?
Well, the second floor looks like it's projecting out over the first floor, right? So, we all love brick, but brick has its own features. Unless what happened was when they made it more contemporary and more modern, they started to play games with what brick looks like. How does it work? So, this being sensitive to the Essex agency is a great idea, but then changing the whole language to being very contemporary or modern it comes back to balance for me. If you can pull it off, great. If you can't pull it off, I just as soon not see the brick there. I don't think, the Essex agency demands that the building near it has to be brick, but maybe the base is brick and maybe
that was the input from staff.
Yeah.
That wasn't
I like the idea. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you my comment. Let's see. How are we dealing with the buffer zone in Gaines Court? That's really where it's down to. I can't imagine, it changes life so much for the neighbors. Right? What do you guys all think?
About the building. So when you look at the building, are you driving in to park underneath? Like that's where
Yeah.
So
that's where
you
drive
where
in.
you see there where you drive in and then you see the first airspace underneath there. That's where it turns to the 9 outside spaces.
And then you
Or
go
it turns in this way into the 24-foot aisle for the parking underneath.
underneath. And so if you were on Gaines Court and you're coming out, are you looking at
You're looking at
cars?
that.
A fence
Other-
is proposed along
Okay.
that side, so they won't be seeing cars.
Okay, but if it wasn't there, that's what's there. Like
Yeah.
you would see the cars parked.
Yep, because it's support,
that.
support structure down through
And
there.
then it
You,
looked,
you need to have the air under.
yeah, okay, yeah, so that's all. And then it looks like there's already vegetation on Gaines Court along that line. Is that staying or going? 'Cause you're-
We haven't located, existing vegetation yet, so, we'd have to look at that closer, but.
Or just, I'm talking about
yeah.
this right here.
Yeah,
So
we'd have to.
that's there.
We'd have to locate what's there, certainly as proposed now. Anything that's within a few feet of the property line would have to be removed.
So
That first building again is a multi-unit building. So it's just the second lot and the third lot. Those are single-family uses. Those are the two abutting single-family uses.
So John, if we'd like to talk more about 15-foot buffer, I think the related issue that I've mentioned here about easements for air and light, I will mention that is not a requirement of the LDC. But I have looked at some precedents from other places where there have been such an issue where you've got like a thin lot, and basically, if in the absence of any rules that prohibit it, it's not first come first serve. It's there are just no rights for anybody. You can hope for the best, but if somebody wants to build and redevelop the parcels along Gaines Court, they can build all the way up to the edge as well and block your windows.
With approval of the board, sure.
Right, but if our rules don't prohibit that, which right now it doesn't, that's a risk you would be taking unless you have an easement for.
So what you just said is what I'm asking you to do. Your rules don't prohibit it. We are beyond the 0-foot setback. I'm saying just conform to your own regs.
What we're saying is that's fine, but if somebody comes along, then both buildings were gonna end up, I mean, now you're like the tenements,
At
right?
that location, Gabe owns the building in the back. If that area ever got redeveloped, I'd say there's a pretty good chance it's Gabe. The building here, as you know, on these large buildings, the way they work is they have to be 61, 62 feet, so you can accommodate the underground parking, that you have standard parking. So what you're talking about is in the zone where you want these buildings and you have 0 setback, if you feel that the second sentence of that, what you're saying is the second sentence of that same section does not apply because we don't abut a single family district. So maybe I'm picking and choosing from that section, but you're also picking and choosing from that section if you just talk about single family use.
I just went and looked at the updated LDC and it does modify that language to kind of.
It's probably, well, if it gets approved, it's gonna solve itself, because when we come back, we're gonna be under the new regs. But,
well,
you've received this, right? So there are definitely some concerns.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So I know Mary Jo's in the audience, so we're gonna get to her momentarily. Because I think we all need to digest this, but the fact that you have a 0 lot line setback doesn't give you the right to put windows in it, for example, right? So I mean, you can do it, but if the next parcel gets developed and they want to go 0 lot line, then you guys are both right. So you can, it's why you see kind of when you go through the city and something gets torn down and you realize that, looked like all these row houses and now there's one missing. They're blank walls on either side. There aren't, nobody's got a window. So it changes what happens in the use of the building. So long and skinny doesn't work if you 0 lot line and you built right up to it. I'll leave it at that. But you're right, there is no setback and you can do it now until something else happens. But I want to go back to the neighbors. there are two single-family uses. And I have one of the landowners in the room, so unless the board has additional questions at this moment, I might go to the audience.
Well, I think it's a question phrased in the letter that we received, but do you have any plans for these for? I noticed that there's some space behind where the dumpster's proposed. What do you envision in that kind of back corner there?
We really haven't at this point, for conceptual. I think there's a big opportunity in that front 12-foot strip. That back area, to be honest, most of the time it's going to be snow storage in the winter. So we hadn't really thought about it beyond that. The building to the back there is owned by Gabe.
All right. Mary Jo, would you like to address the room at this time?
Thank you. Okay, Mary Jo Winkle. I in the house with the green roof there. I've lived there for 30 years. And I have to say that I'm not unhappy that this property is being developed, because it's, as long as I've lived there, it's been a subject of neglect. Very, very bad neglect at some points in time, and it has improved since Gabe purchased it and removed a bunch of the dead trees and, cleaned up the area as far as a hangout for folks in the community who just looked at it as an available space to work on their cars, etc. So I'm not opposed to it. I didn't see any rendering on the games court side, so it's hard for me to visualize what it might look like. I'm trying to scale my vision to say, okay, 34 feet high, what that's going to do to the light and the air, and of course I'll lose the view of the Congregational Church. It's a nice view right now. So a building being there of that height is going to make the court dark, and depending on the siding or whatever, this is the first I've heard about a fence, but again, there was no rendering on that side. It is pretty close to mine and my neighbor's house. I think Christine is still on the call. She's my neighbor. The court is a one-lane driveway, basically. When that house, my neighbor's house, burned 10 years ago, they could not get a fire truck down Gaines Court. And it was bought from the parking lot as it exists right now. I know Gabe has generously offered to move that darn pole that looks like it's been chomped on by beavers, because it's been hit so many times. I'm still not certain that a fire truck can get around that corner. The Crescent Connector is going to go by there, so all of the traffic is going to get rerouted there, so that's going to become a lot busier. I've always been concerned about the triplex and the fire, the way a fire would be fought back there, particularly in the winter, because there's the fire access that was granted when that building was built in the winter has 10, 12 feet of snow plowed against it. So there's no access there. That's another issue. Where's the access for, where does the snow go? Where's the snow get plowed to? Along Gaines Court, there is not just that one pole. There are 3 other electric poles, or utility poles, rather. I don't know what the rules are for proximity of building near utility poles, what the setback from a utility pole might be.
So, let me just ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Chris here, I think. Has, for conceptual plan review, have the fire chief and people looked at it yet? They don't probably see it at this level yet?
Yes, they actually have. I got comments today. It was later than what could come in to the report, but the fire chief says that this would only work from a fire perspective if they have access to the back over here. So I believe there's an easement for access over here, which I hear is sometimes
It's the
blocked with
northeast,
snow.
yeah,
Right.
the northeast
So
corner.
it should not be blocked by with snow, and that would not work for what
And it's been like that since that building's been built.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an issue that we should be fixing. But they say they need to be able to get a truck back here, and they expect that if it can be through the easement, that'd be fine. Gaines Court, they think it's too narrow, but they also say like technically they could get a truck through there, if needed.
Well, the normally the fire department, I think according to NFPA, wants 30 feet, and you don't have 30 feet.
You do not have 30 feet.
But it's in existing conditions, they'll do whatever they need to do, and I don't know why Gaines Court, why they said they couldn't get to it, but I would submit that the common sense approach to a lot of this is if there are easements in place that would allow the emergency vehicles to access the buildings that are in the back there, then probably a lot of those type of concerns can go away. But and it sounds like Gabe has the resources and connections to make that happen. And I think that would be an important part of moving this forward, so that the newer building that he has back there and the other proposed buildings are maintainable, and that they can be reached by fire apparatus and so on. I don't know that there's much that prevents the building that is being proposed from happening, but I think that there's some sensitivity that should be in place around how it interfaces with its neighbors and how its neighbors are, they could build a taller building if they can figure out
Oh, I
how to get the
understand
other
that.
things done. The building can be taller, but I still think that the building could be nicer to look at, and you will be looking at it.
And the privacy, I mean, if there's going to be windows there,
Yeah.
that's looking right in my window or my neighbor's window or down my driveway into my yard,
Yeah.
it's very close.
The zero setback and the lack of ability to, and it's on purpose, right? So that in the village center, some of those, this isn't being developed like a suburban neighborhood where everybody's got their own little, house on a land. That's not what happens in the village center. The village center is on purpose planned to be denser and have no line separation. So there's a lot of stress when something like this is proposed, because the existing land use around it, especially in this spot, is totally old school. It's just so old that it doesn't match what the language says is encouraged. So we're hearing that from the applicants. Your language says do this, and they're right. But the balance is that there are little pieces of the code that says we promote that, and that's what the pages of all the regulations that go into what the architecture of that thing has to look like, and how it interacts with its neighbors, and all those things that are in the historic section. That's what that's in there for. It's to create a way to bridge from the new to the old. And that's why I'm saying, okay, brick might be great, but that's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning. You know, you have to really look at what it takes to belong to that neighborhood. And it's okay to push the neighborhood forward a little bit, but you can't do it to the point where the older things that are right next to you are kind of crunched. You know, you don't want to overly.
Zero-sum game.
Yeah. you don't
Somebody
want-
wins and everybody else loses.
Yeah, you don't want to do
So-
that. So
Mm.
it's you know, it's almost like politics. You know, you got to horse trade for a while, and then you finally come up with a deal that works. And Gabe's a master at that already, so I know he's gonna pull it off. I think for me, it's really how does the sensitivity of that seam right along Gaines Court, how does that get handled? And I think if the building itself is exciting enough, I think, you know, and we really figure out what it means to those people in Gaines Court to put something right in front of them, even if it's on the lot line, I think that can be successful. I mean, we did a building down on the waterfront in Burlington. It's on North Avenue. And it starts out small, and then we left the old piece in front, so everybody, you know, got to see the same thing from North Avenue. And then there's a base, and then there's actually 3 buildings going down, so there is light and there is openness, and you get this rhythm that's happening, even though it's sideways to the main street. And you know, it's just a little more successful because you have some openness. So maybe it's not just one big chunk of building, maybe something else happens that creates more of a neighborhood feel. Just making stuff
Just
up.
saying.
Yeah. But it would be really neat to see a building slide right in there and look like it belongs, right? That's kind of the message. All right. I'm not really sure how to shut this place down, Nick.
There are a couple of things. You know, I feel this is just being shoehorned into a lot. You know, I think the mass is too much. And if it was backed off from that lot line of Gaines Court, that would help. There really isn't any green space. I know it's not necessarily they can take the landscape money and put it into a landscape fund. I hate seeing that happen. I'd like to see a building, you know, a little greener, look a little nicer. I question about the Crescent Connector and the amount of traffic that's going to be going down there, and you're going to reduce the entryway to 20 feet, I believe. Is that what you're considering?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that because you're, what, 12 feet back from the street now?
Yeah.
You got plenty of, yeah. Yeah, it's not like Gaines Court where you show up and you can't get the nose of your car out in front of that building without something swiping the front of it off, right? You won't have that. So I think that, you know, we're all gonna see a new traffic pattern, but it's sight lines that are gonna be.
How will FedEx and UPS service that building
Those are things.
Front on the street,
on the street there
likely.
for a 34 unit building?
Well, I mean, it's residential.
It's what
Yeah.
they do for every building in the village.
So,
I don't think that's the case.
Say, if Route 15 or Main Street is gonna be cut off and all that traffic is gonna be on Railroad Street, I don't see UPS trucks stopping in front of Marchone's and blocking the traffic.
No, I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to just block the traffic. It's if there is, it would be on the when there's parallel parking available. I mean, they'd have to work around that.
There's not gonna be any parking, all the parking is gonna be removed on Railroad Street, the parking spaces that exist right now.
Right, but
I think the traffic situation needs to be evaluated with the new traffic pattern. And I don't know that that's a traffic study. I think the traffic study showing how many cars are going to be using that's already been done. You already know. And so the question is, what's reasonable to expect for 34 units to, you know, how many FedEx trucks a day is that? You know, I mean, is that 3 or is that 40? You know, I don't know, but there are requirements for all of these buildings already that say we need delivery. Somebody's got to have a plan for deliveries, for garbage, for fire trucks, all of those things. So I think that's the challenge. I think the modulation, you know, you could imagine that, you know, maybe, you know, the bulk of the building can be softened by articulation. It's currently rendered as a big square, and it's going to end up being generally a big square, but that doesn't mean it has to just be a flat face, right? You can't tell them that it's not allowed to be that, because it can, right? So 0 lot lines in the village center, where we really are asking them to fill it up. And
I understand that, but it is the boundaries too about neighborhoods, and this is the most historic and buildings we have located with the Brownell Block, Congregational Church, the insurance agency, the cemetery across the street. So we need to pay attention. And I'm not saying it should be brick. I agree with you that as it is designed as there, brick doesn't work. It would look ridiculous in brick. You know, to try and bring other materials in.
I'm not willing to say concede that yet either, but I just think that there's some delicacy that can be applied that's going to make it feel more comfortable. So the point is, it's that balance again. You've got a site, you've got neighbors, you've got character, you've got allowances that let you do things like have 0 lot lines, but the success of the project is going to be in how that gets handled. You may not take everything you can take. You may have to do something that says, okay, well, guess how we're going to do, you know, this for each person or each unit, or what, you know, maybe the fence is playful or something.
So for conceptual, John, as you said, we're looking for feedback from you, and normally after conceptual, lots of money is spent, lots of time is spent. I'm not sure where we're at. I think I'm hearing that if that side is unique enough, interesting enough, fits in for you, does that, you have the ability to do the waiver. I'm saying that if
What's
you read
the
that,
waiver for?
the 15 foot. I mean, if the 15 foot, you know, that side of the building doesn't matter if the board feels the 15 foot applies and they're not willing to waive it, because this building is not a 75-foot building that can become 60 feet, and still 60 foot, 61 is the smallest you can go on these buildings to have parking underneath, unless you went with one-sided parking, and that type of building wouldn't work. So that section starts off by talking about single-family use. The very next sentence clearly says single-family district. So I think that can be read either way. I'll acknowledge that, but I'm choosing to think that that second part, the weight of it, is the single-family district. Regardless, if you feel the other way, it can be waived. So as we move forward to this next expensive step.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. That's why I said the biggest issue is going to be how do we deal with Gaines Court, because I don't know if I have an answer for that yet. And even if I had one, there are other members of the board that may have a different one, and that's kind of tricky, and it doesn't help you guys move forward very comfortably. So.
Well, we can keep in touch with Chris as far as how the new regs are coming along, or whether they get changed, or whether they're in the current, and that may take that whole argument off the table.
Yeah.
May or may not.
How does Chris, just one more point on that. In some municipalities, once the rules are warned and they're public, They take effect, is that a?
Yes, once they're warned, if they're interim zoning and we can apply under them.
Actually, you have to take the more restrictive of the two until it is actually passed. But we have a deadline for passing these LDC amendments, and that is that's the beginning of August because they've been sat on for so long.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about that. That taking a long time. It's either either is gonna change or it's not.
Sounds like it's gonna change before we see you, Ben. I guess what they're saying, right?
Well, the council, it is something that council is discussing, and they've had more questions and concerns about it. So it's hard to tell what will come of it. But
all right.
I mean, if I encourage everybody who is interested in this topic to speak to council about it and to be involved.
Good. So the planning commission is probably answering questions. Would they come to the DRB and ask us anything like, okay, in practice, how does this work?
The planning commission, well, I mean,
No, the city council. If they want to know what's going to happen or how it works or what's the implication of changing this language.
right.
This project is a great example.
I'm putting this on the staff report.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I will say that the intention, and it's been in the code for decades, and people kind of forget about it, but it's been to increase the density in the village center. It's been to try and hold on to historic fabric, but not at the expense of moving forward. And so some of these buildings, we had the same handful of discussions and, tears and not my backyard's gonna disappear kind of thing for over by the Park Street School and those neighborhoods in there, where there's long established residential neighborhoods with village center properties right next to them. And, we've already gone through this a number of times. And
Some of which are single-family districts, though.
some of which are. So now we're
That's
sort of
clear.
taking that off because we had trouble dealing with that. And it didn't seem like the rules were really making it easy for anyone to figure out what was being requested. And so the land development code is trying to keep up with expectations and help manage those, which is why the language is tightening up to say, okay, what we really meant was, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at historic village centers throughout Vermont, you don't have 15-foot buffers between buildings. So your zoning districts, 0 setback, max coverage, no density, no max density, all of that. And then, okay, how does a 15-foot buffer fit in a village center district? How does it fit in any village?
If you were on, Pearl Street in that nice little residential piece as you're coming down the hill, or if you're in Maple Street as you start to get out of the village center, I mean, those are fairly recognized, stable, well-maintained properties with a real pattern to them, and everybody gets that. You get into, Gaines Court and you're going, how did this, get here? But it grew over, centuries ago, and it just never really, in my opinion, there are parts of the town that, or the village or now city, that never really turned into a village or a city. They were just there, and they never evolved.
Yeah.
And that density and the nicer building materials and things just they didn't show up. So now, 100 years later, you still have them. Now, what do you do with them? And so it makes it really tricky to find the balance between the new things that are going in that meet the land development code and the old pieces that are still there.
Yeah.
And it's challenging for all of us, and I'll just leave it at that, but really it's finding the right balance. It'll evolve, it'll be slow, it'll be, a parcel at a time, but the land development code is generally looking for progress. Anything
Public
else?
Works had an important comment that they're hoping that you'd be able to do something about. So any new connections to water and sewer is gonna obviously involve digging up the road. But this road is also being reconstructed over the next year for the Crescent Connector. So so that if you want to be able to help not have to dig up the road right after it's completed, it would really help if you put in the stubs right now, as soon as possible.
If they'll allow us to put them in before the project's approved, I'm sure Gabe's all for that.
Right. Well, if you're just putting in stubs, they'd be very happy with that, and it would mean that you wouldn't have to repair the road to the same standards as we're
Sure.
really making sure it's perfect otherwise. So
You hate to have a patch in a new road.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
I wonder how could they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you allow something like this, but that it is an allowance basically by the town to allow it to happen, and it makes perfect sense.
also, Marcus, our city councilor, has just asked on Zoom, can developers create green space on the roof?
They could. All of these things are possible. It
There
doesn't mean they
was a
have
big,
to or can, but
there was a big write-up in the Burlington Free Press years back on the one for the airport, and I think year 2 it went away. So it was a big, it just doesn't work very well in Vermont.
it's people are always looking for rooftop stuff, and the pressure just isn't quite here for that. Just like going underground's not really quite here for that. But
Was he talking about a green roof or amenity space?
Marcus, if you're there, perhaps you can just speak up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I was really more curious about what the options were, because looking at this particular project and taking into account that this is a flat roof over a large space, thinking about what the possibilities might be, whether it's a green space, whether it's maybe solar or some other use that may be allowed. So that's why I was asking generally, not just specifically for this project. As again, I've been going through the regulation, and so I'm just asking the question so I have a better understanding of it. Thank you.
And we'll be looking at that more.
is solar ready? Like, is that a structural requirement?
It'll be required to be solar ready. I'm assuming we'll do heat pumps, so there will be some mechanical equipment up there, but it is a big enough roof that.
Yeah.
We also have a hand up by Christine.
Yeah, thank you. I am a resident of Gaines Court, which has been brought up a number of times in this meeting. I just wanted to have my voice be heard. I think MJ did a really eloquent job speaking to some of the matters of concern for the two of us who are single family residences on Gaines Court. My main concern is the same as MJ's statement that has already been brought up. It is the width of Gaines Court and the proximity of this new 3-story building to Gaines Court. I want to make it clear I am yes in my backyard. I am please build residences. I know that we need them in our community. I would just beg for thoughtfulness for a facade that is going to be so close to my front door. I also have safety concerns. I live in the house that burned down 10 years ago and couldn't be reached by a fire truck. I watched the previous building burn down. It was really frightening. So would really ask that thoughtfulness be paid to access for emergency vehicles as you guys consider to refine this design. I don't think it's been mentioned, so I'll just bring it up. Currently, the snow from Gaines Court is being plowed into an area abutting the fence on Gabe's property near the triplexes. I would ask that some thoughtfulness be paid to where the snow will go for Gaines Court. And just one thing that really hasn't been brought up, and I don't know how much traction it will gain here, but I respectfully disagree that there is a need for more commercial space in the city center, in the village center. I would love to see some of the other commercial spaces filled up before we start adding more. It makes me feel sad when I drive around and walk around and see so many vacant storefronts. I think that they are, rife for possibility. I think that there are so many wonderful things that we could see go up in Essex Junction city, or town center, and so I would love to see the existing space be used and that space in this building be used more thoughtfully than just another commercial space. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, the commercial space is a little bit tricky right now, and there is, let's say, plenty. I just say that because it doesn't seem like it's all leased up, but traditionally that's something that developers are looking, well, municipalities are looking for from developers, is to have an active street front, which usually translates into commercial or something. So it's easy to say that. I don't know that we have a requirement for that. So if there is a better use that the developers got in mind, like it's a fitness center for the tenants or something like that, I don't know that we would have a strong opinion, plus or minus. Just wants to be active.
And again, I'm not sure if she was on, I know she was on the screen at the beginning, or whether she heard, but it's only about 800 square feet of that space. So it's a very small commercial component, and those may be easier to rent than the larger ones that are vacant.
Yeah.
But,
all right. Any final comments from anyone? Yeah.
So not to harp on the issue, but just a point of clarity. In our first meeting with staff with the city, it was pretty clear they wanted a brick. But that's not necessarily the wish of the board or the mandate of the board at this point.
I would say no, that it wants to make sense with the rest of the village character. And the one building that is really nice that's nearby is brick. It's not all brick. When you look at those, you go, oh, it's a brick building. But when you analyze the material, it's probably 20% wood. So the creation of new facades is gotten to be really tricky. As you know, you can't just, there's no formula anymore for what works. So I'll have a more open mind. But I think when I look at the streetscape of the village, I see more than, just, okay, well, that building is a brick building. Let's do one of those, because one next to it's a wood building, and, but it still has the same language in it. That's, I guess, what I'm missing on this. The language of this is modern as presented now. The village isn't really a modern village. So that's the disconnect I'm getting. I have no problem with the brick, but I want it to be of the same character as the rest of the village. And if you break the rules, you got to break them and know why you broke them and how the play is going. We're not looking for, private jokes in public places kind of thing. It's just, it's tricky, but I think your biggest problem is the wood building next door, because it throws off any sensibility that you have for how to fit into your neighborhood. Because you got, kindling.
we're not going to try to fit into that. I can assure you that.
Good. All right. I would love to continue this conversation with you guys. Anytime you want to come back and keep showing us things, I think that would be fine with me, because it's a fascinating opportunity and it challenges a number of us for many reasons. And before you go spend a ton of money on it, because we don't want you to do that and head down the wrong direction, I'm more than happy to have more conversation. Anyone else on the board?
Question about, I didn't realize this is just conceptual now, but any contemplation of EV charging spaces, that just as more folks are getting into EVs, seems like it would make sense to.
Yep, I'm just writing that down because we haven't gotten there.
Okay.
I will say that maybe at this location, but the rent, Gabe has done a very good job of staying several $100s below rent, and his reasoning to do that is he's had very long-term tenants, and he finds that it's better to stay below rent. Most of his rents qualify as affordable, even though it wasn't affordable. I'm assuming he'll try to do something similar. And the cost of EV cars are out of reach of a lot of us. So I don't expect a high demand for EV cars at this location or the previous application. The same reason that a lot of these folks don't even have vehicles. Some of them choose not to, and they want to, some choose not to, some can't afford to, but if they choose not to, it's because the location of the structure, it makes it palatable for them.
Yeah, that is a challenge. I'll say that, along with additional refinement of the building comes cost. And we've all admired how Gabe can put housing and actually satisfy the housing needs of our community very affordably, and that's wonderful. So that says a lot, because a lot of the big players in the market can't do that. And
all the other buildings are $300 plus higher than Gabe. And granted, they might have spent a little bit more money, but not that much more.
Yeah. So, again, it's challenging. It's a balance. We'll find it.
Yeah.
I think I would like to really understand the whole Gaines Court legally, just because I don't know that we can require a buffer there, and certainly under the new language, we can't require a buffer there. So that seems to have some impact on exactly what happens. And so if there's anything from a legal side on how Gaines Court is classified, like what is a private street really about, and how does it fit into our LDC, and does that have any impact? That would be helpful, because that's still a little bit of an open question for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure Gabe and his attorney probably have some of the answers already, because he's had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Previously.
Yeah. And so Gabe, your other building at the back there, the larger one by the edge of the church parking lot, is that served from Gaines Court? Is that their primary access? Okay.
Yes, I share half the cost of maintaining that road.
Yeah.
Because there's 3 houses and I got 3 units in the back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an important access point for all of you, and I think we want to make sure it gets treated properly. And certainly it would be great if it was wider, but it's basically on everyone's property already. So I think half the problem is the building in the front, and the other half is probably just how you agree to go forward as a group of people sharing a driveway. So, anyway, thank you so much for this project. I have nothing further. So
Good.
do we need to make a motion, or do we need to just say those are our comments and they're all on record now? I know you had a whole bunch of, I don't know that we actually need to.
Well, I think technically there's no approval at this point, because
Yeah.
there's conceptual.
All right. So I'm gonna have all the notes typed up, and then we'll look at them as meeting minutes, and I think that'll be the direction. But you kind of heard the flavor of the board here, and hopefully that serves us till at least the next meeting.
We are walking away with 20 feet being okay for the entrance.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is adjournment the last thing on our list here? And if so, I will, I'll take a motion.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All right. You beat me to it.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, Brian.